revived American leadership in space. It's a particular pleasure to be back here in Florida on the Space Coast, and also to be here at the world's premier gateway to space. Join me in thanking the Kennedy Space Center and Director Bob Cabana for their tremendous hospitality and leadership for space. So it's wonderful to be here at this Apollo Center, Bob, and it's an incredible place. People have come from around the country and around the world to be inspired by the past, and now the present, and the future of American leadership in space. And we're truly grateful, Kennedy Space Center, for all that you've done and to continue to advance American leadership. Allow me to also bring greetings from a champion of American space exploration, someone who has revived Americans' leadership in human space exploration in just 4 short years. I bring greetings from the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. Today at this 8th meeting of the National Space Council, we will have updates from all of our council's members about the progress that we have made, both in civilian, economic, and military advances in space. But before I start, let me at least acknowledge the passing of an extraordinary American whose life and contributions to American aviation have undoubtedly led to inspire the advances that we've made in the vast expanse of space. This past Monday, America lost one of our greatest heroes, one of the greatest heroes not just in the history of the United States Air Force, but in the history of American aviation, General Chuck Yeager. He was a man of a humble background, grew up in rural West Virginia, enlisted in the military. He would go on to become one of the greatest aviators of all time. Chuck Yeager was a war hero. He shot down 13 Nazi aircraft, but was himself shot down over France. Flew more than 150 military planes, a total of more than 10,000 hours, 30 years of active duty, and as history records, was the first man to break the sound barrier. General Chuck Yeager has now left us, made his final ascent, but it was my great honor as we renamed 2 Air Force bases as Space Force bases just a short while ago to announce that at the direction of President Donald Trump, we are initiating today efforts to rename an upcoming United States military base after the late and great General Chuck Yeager. I think people here at Kennedy Space Center know, and all of us on the Space Council know, we literally would not be here today but for the achievements of General Yeager and all of those who've been inspired by his courage. And America will never fail, or never forget the life and contribution of General Chuck Yeager. So as we gather for this 8th installment of the National Space Council, allow me to express my appreciation to all of the members of the Space Council and to reflect for just a few moments before we get started on how much has changed over the last 4 years since the very first meeting of this council. You know, when you look at national security, the progress that we've made in civil and private space sectors, one thing is clear. In 4 short years, America is leading in space once again. It's true. When we took office, the National Space Council had lain dormant for more than 25 years. But President Trump articulated an inspiring vision for renewed American leadership in space. In his inaugural address, the President said, and I quote, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space." And so we have set out to do. In our first year in office, the President revived this council to reinvigorate and coordinate space activities all across the federal government. The President brought together some of the best minds in government and the private sector to strengthen America's space enterprise. And so many of you are here with us today, and we're truly grateful. And whether it's providing for the common defense or growing our space economy across America, that's exactly what we've done throughout the past 4 years. In the very first days of our administration, the President signed multiple executive orders and presidential directives to reorient our space program to human space exploration. He took steps to unleash America's commercial space companies and to safeguard our national interests in the increasingly complex and competitive domain of space. In our first year in office, the President signed Space Policy Directive 1 and gave NASA a clear goal that we are going to go back to the moon, and this time we are going to stay. We made clear in our first year that the moon is not a final destination, but it's a base for developing and training for future deep space missions. We're going back to the moon, and then we're going to Mars and beyond. As we gather here in this historic place, I can't help but think back 48 years ago, December 1972. To Apollo 17, the last Apollo mission to the moon. It would be December 14th, 1972, that Apollo 17's commander, a Navy pilot named Gene Cernan, and a graduate of Purdue University in Indiana, he prepared to depart for Earth from the surface of the moon. And he spoke words that have really echoed through our time as an ongoing admonition. He said, and I quote, "America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow." And he said, "As we leave the moon, we leave as we came. And God willing, we shall return with peace and hope for all mankind." Gene Cernan was the last man to walk on the moon, but he didn't want to stay the last. He spent the rest of his natural life advocating for America to go back to the moon. And we are going to honor Gene Cernan's memory by putting the next man and the first woman on the moon in just a few short years. As you'll also hear updates today, the President also set NASA and the private sector, the entrepreneurial companies that have been involved in space exploration and development, in motion to ensure that we would return to the moon. And then the next astronauts on the surface of the moon and all the economic development in space will be driven by American ingenuity. And we're going to ensure that Americans we're going to be the very first. The very first not only to develop on the moon and Mars, but also to continue to develop the economic potential of space exploration. Even in this challenging year in the life of our nation, when Americans have sacrificed so much, we've continued to make steady progress toward that goal of renewed American leadership in space. This spring, it was my great honor to attend the first crewed launch, along with the President of the United States, from right here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's the first time we sent American astronauts into space from Kennedy Space Center in nearly a decade. And then, not to wait a minute further, this last November, I returned again to see the second crewed full-scale launch and mission of American astronauts from American soil back into American space. That's the result of real leadership and renewed American leadership in space. And what's remarkable is those rockets were built by American private enterprise in this new partnership that we have forged and built upon in the United States over the last 4 years. When a businessman turned president decided to renew our commitment to space, he knew it was important to unleash the power of America's private sector, and so we have done. As you will note out here today from the Secretary of Commerce, we went to work early on to cut and streamline out-of-date regulations that made the United States the #1 country in the world for space business, and will continue to accelerate investment and development in space. This past April, the President signed an executive order to recognize and promote the rights of private companies to recover and use space resources. That order, we believe, will provide the kind of clarity and stability that our businesses need to thrive. It will give our entrepreneurs the incentive to take our commercial space activity to all new heights. And just last week, NASA made its first commitments to buy lunar material from private companies and will continue to build on creating the kind of incentives that will generate investment and space development for generations to come. And even as we make great progress in expanding America's commercial activity in space, we also recognize the challenges of digital threats to our space operations. And that's why the President established cybersecurity principles for all of our space systems, whether government or private. The President put in place the world's first comprehensive space traffic management policy as well, and made it clear that we're going to use the resources, the capabilities, and the technologies of the private sector to make all space activities safer and more secure than ever before. It's amazing as you think about all these accomplishments in renewed human exploration in space or here in the United States, the difference that all these distinguished members of the National Space Council have made in America's future in space. But at the time that we acknowledge the progress that we have made in expanding human space exploration and reviving American space enterprise, we also recognize that there are challenges and even threats in space as well. As I just said, as we dedicated 2 Air Force bases now as the first 2 Space Force bases in America, space is a vacuum, but we aren't operating in a vacuum when it comes to our national security. The space race that began in the 1950s continues today. We are in the lead, but we are not alone. As you will hear today in the National Space Council from the Director of National Intelligence and others, China and Russia are continuing to develop space weaponry. Russia demonstrated a space-based anti-satellite weapon earlier this year. China is developing a new manned space station, and its robotic spacecraft will return samples from the moon in just a matter of weeks. In fact, China is increasingly emerging as a serious competitor in space, just as they are in other areas of the global economy and to the strategic interests of the United States. As the world witnessed, China recently landed an unmanned craft on the moon, and for the first time, robotically raised the red flag of communist China on that magnificent desolation. All of that competition, the investment of other nations on Earth, and security in space is among the reasons why our Commander-in-Chief took the unprecedented step of establishing the first new branch of our armed forces in some 70 years. President of the United States, now almost a year ago, signed into law the creation of the United States Space Force. Under President Trump, the highest priority of our administration is the safety and security of the American people. And where too often in the past, America has neglected growing security threats in space, this president called for extending our dominance on land and sea and air to the final frontier. It would be June of 2018 when President Trump laid out his vision for American military power in space. He called for the creation of that new military service that we spoke of today at the dedication of those bases. I believe it is a tribute to the President's leadership as well as the leadership of all the military personnel that are gathered here today, that literally in just a year and a half after our President first called for the establishment of a Space Force, after it had been talked about for a half a century, he was able to sign it into law. It's extraordinary to think of the contribution that the United States Space Force will make to the security of our nation and the perpetuation of our freedom. As Deputy Secretary Norquist will reflect in a few minutes, the Space Force is growing stronger by the day. In fact, Secretary Barrett and I were not long ago in Colorado Springs when we saw the first 86 company-grade officers commissioned into the United States Space Force. And we're pleased to be joined today by the Chief of Space Operations, the man who has been working around the clock to stand up the United States Space Force. Join me in thanking General J. Raymond, who's with us here today. General. So we've made great progress We evidence that today in the dedication of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and also Patrick's Space Force Base right here on the Space Coast in Florida. And I know the Lieutenant Governor of Florida is with us here today and is pleased to see that. But just like 42 years ago when Gene Cernan was on his way to the moon, and just like when Chuck Yeager was breaking the sound barrier in the 1940s, the United States continues to face an era of competition. But as members of the National Space Council know, it's a competition that America is winning today, and we're going to keep on winning in space for generations to come. And that's one more reason today, while I'm pleased to announce that the President, as of today, has issued a new national space policy that we will articulate at this meeting of the National Space Council. The National Space Policy provides the President's direction to the executive branch on all space activities. It emphasizes that space is critical to our security and our way of life, and lays out the fundamental principles to put America first in space. Dr. Scott Pace will go into more detail about the President's new national space policy in just a few moments, but it represents our ongoing commitment to, at the National Space Council and throughout this administration, to ensure American leadership in space. But for now, let me just say that because of the hard work of all the men and women of the National Space Council putting our President's vision into effect, because of the hard work of all of the dedicated men and women on our Space Council Advisory Group and the support of the American people and leaders in the Congress, we've made great progress in the last 4 years. But as you will hear again today, there is a renewed determination all across this nation and all across this government and all across every level of government to continue to build on the extraordinary progress that we've made. And today we will hear about that progress, the ongoing challenges and opportunities that America faces. So let me say once again, welcome to this 8th meeting of the National Space Council. Let's get to work. Again, let me call this meeting of the National Space Council here at the Kennedy Space Center on Florida's historic Space Coast into session. Today's meeting will include important updates and announcements from council members and the council's executive secretary. First and foremost, allow me to turn our attention to the economic progress that we've made. Policies have been advanced. The Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, has been a great champion of space. Even as we've seen the American economy over the last 4 years reach all new heights. I think we set another record on the stock market again today, Mr. Secretary, but let me just say how grateful we are for your immediate appreciation for the impact that space exploration and entrepreneurship could have on the American economy. And why don't you give us an update on the Department of Commerce's activities related to space traffic management, international space development, and investment, and other encouraging space news. But join me in thanking Secretary Wilbur Ross for his great leadership on this cabinet and on the National Space Council.
Thank you, Vice President Pence, for the opportunity to update the National Space Council on the growth of the space economy and the related work that is taking place at the Commerce Department. Here at Cape Canaveral last week, SpaceX executed its 100th successful commercial Falcon 9 rocket launch. They sent a crew and thousands of pounds of supplies and research gear aboard a Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station. I'm reminded that it wasn't long ago when travel among the stars was merely a distant goal before it was even a race among nations. Indeed, our country has achieved remarkable progress in the space sector, and now again, as American business people continue creating new ways to make space more commercially feasible. I toured such an example earlier this year, Astrobotic's new headquarters in Pittsburgh, one of the many small companies doing very creative things. Their facility will support unmanned missions to the moon and drive technological development that brings us closer to NASA's planned 2024 human moon landing. Such landmark accomplishments in the commercial space field come alongside record-breaking economic investment in space activities. Globally, another $4.9 million was invested in space companies in the third quarter alone. This not only marks the most productive quarter on record, but it also raises the total 2020 investment to $17.5 billion in the overall industry. And wonderfully, the U.S. accounts for 62% of the industry's total investment. Morgan Stanley projects that revenue generated by the global space industry may top $1 trillion by the year 2040. And the recent explosion of the industry here in the U.S. is due in no small part to the efforts of the Trump administration. The administration's pro-space agenda and the work of the National Space Council has already had significant impacts. NOAA has removed red tape that previously surrounded remote sensing technology by shortening the licensing timelines from 74 days to 28 days at present. This enables companies to sell data from satellites more easily and more efficiently, helping commercial satellite operators stay competitive in a rapidly changing global marketplace. Commerce Department has also taken steps over the last year at the behest of the Vice President to identify new space missions and get them the necessary authorizations to proceed in line with our treaties. The goal here is to alleviate the administrative and regulatory burden on emerging companies and technologies, and we enthusiastically continue in that mission. Financial indicators and regulatory procedures aside, one simple way to observe the growth of our space industry is to look at the number of satellites in orbit. This year alone, the number of active satellites in orbit is set to increase by more than 50%, 50%, to 1,250, of which about 80% are small sats. And the Satellite Industry Association estimates that up to 110,000 new satellites could be in orbit by 2030. This is good news for projects like SpaceX's Starlink, as well as for smaller companies that can benefit from the growing accessibility of private satellites. But the increase in satellites has also created a unique set of challenges when it comes to managing orbital traffic. We are seeing more and more frequent near misses that could cause unprecedented new amounts of debris. If two significant objects were to collide, they could create such a shower of debris that it could endanger the astronauts aboard the International Space Station. It could endanger billions of dollars of U.S. and other investment in space, and it could also interfere with the growth of space commerce. Fortunately, there's no shortage of brilliant men and women who have made remarkable headway toward managing this problem. In 2018, the Trump administration's Space Policy Directive 3 provided a unique approach to the management of orbital traffic. The Commerce Department's Office of Space Commerce and our interagency partners took on the missions laid out by this initiative. And today, I'm proud to report that we're in the midst of finalizing a Department of Commerce, Department of Defense MOU that will provide a detailed plan for the improvement of space situational awareness and ultimately space traffic management. We have also drawn on existing NOAA resources to establish a new open architecture data repository. This system allows both private and government entities, including those of our allies, to share data, increasing all parties' situational awareness amidst an increasingly crowded orbital environment. We continue to work with our allies in industry on the norms, standards, and best practices that will inform new rules of the road for space. We have also worked with private business and technology leaders from around the globe in this issue. In fact, just before Thanksgiving, the Office of Space Commerce hosted an industry day with over 250 companies participating, virtually of course, to discuss our approach to the open architecture data repository. We will continue to work collaboratively with the public and private sector to tackle this challenge. It's not the only one we face. China's lunar landing last week underscores that we are not the only ones invested in the business of space, and that competition for American companies operating in this sector is real competition. Similarly, Japan became the first country to bring back to Earth a soil sample from an astronaut. Looking ahead, my department's Bureau of Economic Analysis will publish within the next 2 weeks innovative experimental statistics that will help us further measure and understand the space sector. And I look forward to sharing this informative new data with all of you. The United States remains an incubator for greatness like no other, and I'm confident that we will retain our position as the premier hub for space-based exploration and business. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Secretary Ross, and more importantly, thank you for your leadership
Thank you, Mr. President.
on the National Space Council on behalf of American entrepreneurial leadership in space. Truly extraordinary accomplishments. And my favorite one is that you said at the present point, $17.5 billion in investment in the last year, and more than 60% of that is invested in the United States of America.
Yes.
So thanks for helping to facilitate that. The Secretary of Energy, a member of our cabinet, Dan Brouillette, is here with an update on space nuclear power efforts, and under his leadership, the collaborations between the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and NASA. Mr. Secretary, let me also thank you for your energetic and tireless efforts in forging exactly the kind of partnerships across government that are facilitating advances of American technology and space exploration. Secretary Dan Brouillette, the Department of Energy, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President, for that kind introduction. I'm honored to join you today to provide the National Space Council with a brief update on the initiatives that our department, the U.S. Department of Energy, has undertaken since the Council's last meeting in May. In July of this year, NASA hosted our first ever NASA DOE Executive Committee meeting right here at the Kennedy Space Center. The Executive Committee that was established under our new NASA DOE MOU that Administrator Bridenstine and I signed allows us to strategically pursue opportunities that will advance our cooperation between our two departments in space activities. At that July meeting, NASA and DOE agreed to establish 3 joint working groups. One group is focused on power infrastructure for the proposed Artemis lunar space camp. The second group focuses on developing nuclear power and propulsion systems for future Moon and Mars missions, as well as robotic deep space exploration. And the third group, Mr. Vice President, is focused on pursuing space science and innovation interests, particularly high-performance computing initiatives that hopefully will address the challenges of traffic management that Secretary Ross just spoke about, weather issues, and planetary defense from near-Earth objects. These working groups will ensure that DOE and our national laboratories are effectively harnessing the capabilities of our world-class scientists, our engineers, our technicians, and our research facilities to partner with NASA to solve some of the greatest technical challenges facing the United States. Since our last council meeting, we've also continued our space-related engagement with the U.S. Department of Defense. In October, DOE senior leadership teams went to the Pentagon for a space technology mini-summit to discuss how DOD and DOE could cooperate more strategically on space-related challenges. Our senior policy teams and our technical leaders met with Acting Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, as well as with representatives from the Strategic Capabilities Office, the Space Development Agency, and DARPA, to explore ways of strengthening DOE's contributions to the space mission areas of each of those offices. We were extremely encouraged by the outcome of the mini-summit, and we will continue to work with the Undersecretary's office as well as other elements of DOD. As DOE looks to the future, we will continue to leverage our global leadership in nuclear power technologies to provide sustainable power solutions for space applications such as radioisotope power, surface fission power, and nuclear thermal propulsion. Following the successful launch of the Perseverance rover, which is powered by a DOE-developed radioisotope power system, DOE and NASA began formal engagement with nuclear aerospace and commercial power sectors to design and develop a surface power system for a lunar demonstration in the late 2020s. We're also working on engagement opportunities with private industry to advance thermal nuclear propulsion technologies. We want to move that ball even further forward. DOE, NASA, and DOD are also working with industry to establish advanced nuclear fuel production capabilities to support future terrestrial and space demand needs, and seeking to establish and maintain a nuclear supply chain capability that enables us to address a very wide range of applications. In addition to those things, DOE and NASA successes in ramping up plutonium-238 isotope production have now eliminated projected supply shortfalls, increasing the opportunities for deep space missions in the 2020s and beyond. Through our strategic investments, DOE and NASA have also modernized large portions of the radioisotope power system supply chain, eliminating single-point failures and improving reliability to support quicker mission tempos. Yet there's so much more that we at DOE can do, and we will do it. We're looking for ways to apply our next-generation computing technologies to address the tracking, modeling, and data analysis challenges of space weather warnings, space debris tracking and avoidance, and large-scale analysis of space radiation in cosmic microwave environments. Mr. Vice President, this is all possible because of your leadership of the National Space Council and the President's focus on significant space goals. And our work at the DOE is enabled by the great work of my colleagues across the interagency. So I'd like to especially thank all of those who have partnered closely with us, especially Jim Bridenstine and Jim Morhart at NASA, and of course Michael Kratsios at DoD. Finally, it's in this spirit of collaboration that I'm pleased to announce DOE's new space strategy, which we will soon publish. This decade outlook will directly support the national space policy and will focus DOE on being a key technology developer to support the space missions of our interagency partners. Thank you again for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to join you. DOE, or as I like to call it, the Department of Exploration, looks forward to a future of powering innovation, of driving exploration, and for reaching for the stars. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Secretary Briette, and I hope it's not lost, particularly on anyone looking on. I know all the experts that are gathered here, civilian and military, understand it, but the innovation that you're promoting through the Department of Energy on the development of nuclear power is what will precisely enable us to do deep space exploration and to put American astronauts on Mars. Even a layperson like me understands that when you've got nuclear power, you can run the engine the whole way there. And I've been assured it would take us about half the amount of time to get to Mars and get back from Mars with nuclear power. I just want to commend you for the way you've used the department. You've worked with the Department of Defense closely with NASA to promote the development of that innovation. Truly, it's going to be a game changer for American leadership in human space exploration.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So thank you. Another round of applause for the Secretary of Energy. It's great. Someone that I've come to admire and appreciate very much, a key member of our administration, is the Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. He's been involved in advancing policies that will give us the capacity to continue to monitor planetary weather issues from space, so vital to the life of the nation. He himself is a legendary weatherman, and he's brought that discipline and that creativity to the National Space Council. Join me in welcoming Dr. Kelvin Drogemeyer. Dr. Drogemeyer.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. It's an honor and privilege to be here today on this historic occasion. I really appreciate so very much your leadership of the Council and your extraordinary service to America as our Vice President. Thank you so very much for that. Under the President's leadership and under your leadership, Mr. Vice President, this nation has recommitted itself to space discovery and exploration and the advancement of humanity's expansion into the heavens. Today, I would like to highlight two areas where we have made really significant progress over the recent months and years, and where I believe our continued effort is needed. The first of these topics is space weather. Now, we're all familiar, as the Vice President said, with terrestrial weather, the towering clouds and beautiful thunderstorms that we see every afternoon in the summer here in Oklahoma, the very powerful storms that we see in the Midwest, like places like Indiana. They're beautiful, but they're also very destructive, and so we have to really understand and look to predict those. Well, space weather is basically no different. It encompasses a wide array of phenomena that are equally, in some cases, very beautiful, but also they complicate our exploration activities, and they really have the potential to degrade and even destroy some of the infrastructure that is most critical to our nation's security and our economy. So the importance of both understanding and forecasting and accounting for space weather is very, very important as we reinvigorate our human space exploration program. In October 2020, the President signed the Pro-SWIFT Act. It's an acronym which established as U.S. policy, and I quote, to prepare and protect against the social and economic impacts of space weather phenomena. The Pro-SWIFT Act also provides statutory authority for existing space weather coordination activities under the National Science Technology Council. Now, in March of last year, that same National Science Technology Council released a National Space Weather Strategy and Action Plan. And that very same day, the President signed an executive order on coordinating national resilience to something called electromagnetic pulses. Now, they're relevant here because the sorts of geomagnetic disturbances that occur in the sun that are disruptive, they're called space weather, disruptive to our space activities. They're both a space weather phenomena, and they're also naturally occurring as EMPs. So since the release of those documents, federal agencies have worked very, very hard on their implementation, and together with the academic and private sector and also international partners, we've made great progress. And I want to highlight very quickly 3 areas. First, the U.S. Geological Survey is working toward completing a survey of ground conductivity across the United States. Now, we're familiar with conductivity, lightning across the sky, and conductivity on power lines, but there's actually conductivity in the ground. And these data help USGS and also NOAA develop new operational and geoelectric field maps, the actual mapping of the geoelectric field. It provides much more accurate estimates of electric currents that are generated by geomagnetic storms. And those things can then disrupt power operations and resilience and things like that. So that hazard map is going to be a very, very important tool that we have to sustain electrical power during geomagnetic storms. Second, as a result also of partnership between NOAA and NASA, NOAA's Space Weather Follow-on spacecraft is scheduled for launch in 2024, that magical year when we're going to return to the moon. This will ensure continuity of observations critical to space weather prediction and forecasting, and also to NOAA's geomagnetic storm watches and warnings that it issues regularly. And third, NOAA, NASA, and also the National Science Foundation have funded several research opportunities that are going to advance solar and geospace modeling and improve space weather predictions. Just like we have models to predict terrestrial weather, we have models to actually predict space weather. And that research targeted key administration priorities established through the space policy directives that the Vice President mentioned, including human space exploration and space traffic management, as Secretary Ross mentioned. These agencies are also working very, very closely together to implement a framework to accelerate transition of space weather research to operations. Very, very important transition. And they will help inform key decision making for operations of critical infrastructure like our electric power grid. Finally, the second topic I want to address really briefly is planetary protection. Now, what is planetary protection? It's basically the practice of mitigating risks to Earth of harmful biological contamination due to space activities. There's actually 2 sides of that coin. It includes protecting the search for extraterrestrial life by controlling the introduction of biological contaminants from Earth to other celestial bodies. We call that forward contamination. But it also includes protecting our own biosphere here on Earth from potentially harmful biological contamination from things like returning spacecraft. We call that backward contamination. So as we prepare for human exploration of Mars and other solar system bodies, as the Vice President mentioned, now is the time to review and update our planetary protection policy. Existing U.S. policy was established back in the Apollo program, and it's not really been substantively updated since then, so it's been many decades. Meanwhile, of course, as you all know, there have been very, very significant technological and research developments in the field of space, a lot of new actors, including a lot of private companies, and so things are accelerating very dramatically. So to address this challenge, OSTP and the National Space Council staff, all the wonderful folks here, have partnered over the past 6 months to co-lead an interagency working group on planetary protection. It's really a whole-of-government effort. And we deliberated several topics. First, of course, as I mentioned, how to accelerate commercial space exploration and development while we also preserve the scientific integrity in the search for life on other terrestrial bodies. We want to avoid that backward contamination to Earth. Likewise, we want to avoid that forward contamination as well. And then also, third, making sure that private sector activities are protected, because we all know that commercial activities, as we've seen here, are extremely important. So looking forward, planetary protection has to really be a key element of our strategy, and it certainly is, across all of the federal government, but also with our academic and our industry partners. We want to absolutely ensure a safe, sustainable, and predictable Earth and space environment as we continue to advance U.S. leadership in space exploration and commercialization. Mr. Vice President, I am completely grateful to the wonderful opportunity you've provided to me and others at OSTP to work with all these great folks on the National Space Council on these initiatives over the last several months and years. And we look forward to the wonderful days that lay ahead for America in space. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you so much. Calvin, great job. One of the enduring lessons that I've learned as Chairman of the National Space Council is you actually have weather in space. So thanks for your great leadership on that, and so vitally important to our nation's economy and nation's security, as you mentioned. So thank you, Kelvin. Great report. We've talked a lot about the impact on the economy on this National Space Council over the course of the past 4 years. We've talked just as much about our national security, and as I reflected in my opening remarks, with the encouragement of all the members of the National Space Council, this administration has taken strong strides to advance our national security in space. So today I wanted to turn our attention to our security issues. For the first time in his role as Director of National Intelligence, John Radcliffe joins us today. He's going to provide an update on international space threats and the competition that we face. John, you and I have talked. You wrote a compelling piece over the last several days, particularly about the strategic competition that China poses us here on Earth, as well as in the heavens. We appreciate your leadership very much. But as I said before, I think you understand, the President understands, is space is a vacuum, but we're not operating in a vacuum, especially when it pertains to the security of the people of the United States of America. So join me in welcoming the Director of National Intelligence, our DNI, John Radcliffe, to the National Space Council.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and let me start. I know this is a common refrain as you listen to all of my fellow council members, but it's because we all marvel at your success and leadership over this Space Council, and I think everyone here wants to express our gratitude and appreciation from the Council and on behalf of a grateful nation, so thank you very much. To my fellow council members, thank you for allowing me to update you on the threats that we face in space and how the intelligence community is taking unprecedented action in order to increase the effectiveness of our national security space enterprise and to respond to the President's new space policy. By almost any measure, the dramatic increases in space-related capabilities and services over the past decade have been game changers with profound implications for life on Earth. Currently, over 80 nations operate in space, and 50 countries have dedicated government budgets for space. And governments are not the only players in space. Dozens of new commercial space companies have emerged with plans to launch tens of thousands of satellites in the coming years, more than all of the satellites that have been launched since the dawn of the space age. Over the past 5 years, U.S. companies have launched more commercial remote sensing satellites into orbit than the rest of the world. But today that trend is reversing. The National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, which I oversee, predicts that in this decade the rest of the world will launch at least twice as many commercial remote sensing satellites as the United States. Economically, the global space industry has grown rapidly in recent years and is now approaching $500 billion in annual revenue. But more critical is that broad sectors of the U.S. economy have come to rely upon space-related capabilities. Our estimates suggest that industries with reliance on space-based services now contribute over $5 trillion to our gross domestic product. Simply put, we depend on space systems as critical infrastructure, directly supporting the American way of life. If these space-based services are disrupted, we could see adverse effects on nearly all sectors of the U.S. economy, including consumer supply chains, transportation, telecommunications, agriculture, and finance. Mr. Vice President and fellow members, to a degree unparalleled in American history, the nation's economy and security rely upon space systems that our competitors are challenging and that our adversaries are increasingly threatening. To that point, America's vital interests are increasingly at risk as China and Russia develop and field destructive weapons to threaten U.S. and allied space capabilities. As I wrote in an op-ed published in the Wall Street Journal last week, the intelligence is clear. China poses the greatest national security threat to the United States, and that includes China's actions in space, where China is pursuing weapons capable of destroying our satellites up to geosynchronous Earth orbit, where many of our critical space systems reside. China has also deployed a ground-based missile intended to target and destroy satellites in low Earth orbit. Russia has a similar system to China in development that is likely to be operational in the next several years, and Russia has also fielded a ground-based laser weapon which could blind or damage our space-based optical sensors. And I'll note that Russia in particular has recently demonstrated provocative behavior, creating a potentially dangerous situation in space. Over the past year, the Russian government, as the Vice President noted, launched a satellite that began to actively maneuver close to a U.S. government satellite. I want to make clear to the members of this council that we consider this to be threatening behavior, especially considering that the Russians have previously launched a very similar satellite that exhibited characteristics of a weapon when it released a high-speed projectile. Our Space Force Chief, General Raymond, agreed by recently saying this is not the behavior of a responsible spacefaring nation. In short, the threat to the United States and allied space systems continue to grow, and we should not allow that threat to grow unabated. And because of that, the President's new national space policy recognizes that space is and should be a priority intelligence domain, something the intelligence community has already begun to take action on and to move out. Earlier this year, we directed our intelligence agencies to increase support to space defense and added new funding to counter space threats. Although those numbers are classified, this represents a significant new investment which will directly address the emerging intelligence requirements of the Space Force. Additionally, we are working directly with the Space Force leadership to create a new National Space Intelligence Center which will deliver intelligence support necessary to achieve our national security objectives. The establishment of this new center will provide the nation unparalleled scientific and technical intelligence on space-related threats, and it will serve as the service intelligence center for the Space Force. As I described earlier, America's entrepreneurs and innovators are demonstrating amazing new capabilities in commercial space marketplace. The new national space policy recognizes that the rapidly expanding commercial space industry is a vital element of national power. Consistent with this recognition, I recently approved the creation of the Intelligence Community Commercial Space Council. This is a high-level forum which will facilitate collaboration across the intelligence community and with industry, focusing on the intersection of commercial space services and national security. The Council will deepen our understanding of the capabilities and trends of both the United States and foreign commercial space industries. It will provide recommendations to bolster our use of commercial space capabilities, and it will support the growth of a robust U.S. commercial space industry that is responsive to our national security needs. As an example of our increasing engagement with the commercial space sector, the National Reconnaissance Office, or NRO, recently conducted a national security mission on a small commercial rocket launched from outside of the United States, an achievement which was a first for our intelligence community. The new national space policy also recognizes that the intelligence community and the Department of Defense are co-equal partners in the national security space enterprise, with both operating a variety of spacecraft that perform vital missions to our nation. However, countering the increasing threats we face now and in the future will require an even higher level of collaboration and integration than in the past. Previously, we reported to this Council that the intelligence community and Department of Defense have agreed to align U.S. Space Command and the NRO under a new protect and defend strategy for the purposes of jointly guarding our vital space systems should a conflict ever extend to space. For the first time, there will be a unified structure that fully integrates intelligence and defense plans, authorities, and capabilities to ensure seamless execution of space defense actions. I'm pleased to report that the NRO and Space Command are testing this emerging construct in a series of war games and experiments that are designed to pressure test the new arrangement before Space Command reaches its full operational capability. Finally, I am very pleased to report that my team at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is working with our Space Force leadership to evaluate the potential for the Space Force to become the 18th member of the United States intelligence community. We anticipate a decision on this history-making opportunity in the next month or two, which would profoundly strengthen the partnership between the Department of Defense and our intelligence community. In conclusion, as adversaries increasingly threaten our vital interests in space, the actions that I have described here for you today, plus many more of a classified nature that I cannot discuss publicly, will continue to provide us with a competitive advantage, will allow us to counter emergent threats in space, and allow us to achieve unified action should conflict ever extend to space. I want to assure each of you, my fellow council members, as well as the American public, that if our adversaries challenge us in space, they will face a truly united national security space team. Thank you again, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity and members of the council to address you on these important efforts. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Director Radcliffe. Thank you for that stirring summary, but also thank you for the visionary recommendation. We very much look forward to that, and the notion of adding the United States Space Force to the infrastructure of our intelligence community. Makes great sense, and I want to commend you for leaning into this and making such a meaningful contribution to this 8th meeting of the National Space Council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. There has always been a chair on the National Space Council for the Secretary of Defense, and successive Secretaries of Defense have played the role and have been full partners in renewing America's commitment to our national security in space. We're deeply grateful to them for their service, but a common denominator, a consistent ally and advocate for advancing America's national security interests in space has been the Deputy Secretary of Defense, David Norquist. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Deputy Secretary of Defense for taking the guidance of this National Space Council, taking the vision of the Commander-in-Chief, and moving out so quickly at the Department of Defense. You've made a great difference in the security of this country in the vast expanse of space. So join me in thanking Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist for a job well done.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Vice President, for chairing this meeting today. You just heard about some of the challenges and threats facing us in space. Since the last National Space Council meeting back in May, the Department of Defense has made tremendous progress in adjusting to the challenges of space as a warfighting domain. Today, I want to highlight our developments across the Department, the U.S. Space Force, the U.S. Space Command, and within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And in doing so, I want to thank those around the table. Your efforts and partnerships are vital to achieving our nation's objectives in space. So let me begin with an update on the Space Force. In order to grasp the magnitude of what the Department of Defense has accomplished, it is worth pausing to reflect on the timeline. The Space Force was officially established when President Trump signed the fiscal year 2000 National Defense Authorization Act on December 20th, 2019, less than 1 year ago. It was originally planned that the Space Force would be established 1 year after the NDAA was signed. So, Mr. Vice President, that would have been 11 days from today, and I would have been spending today explaining to you the things we hoped to get done and might get done in the future. But instead, the President and Congress understood the urgency of strengthening our space-based military capabilities, and they directed us to get right to work. Following this spirit of speed, we have moved rapidly to advance the Space Force, and we have reached many milestones. Operationally, the Space Force has launched satellites into space and provided support to NASA's 2 successful human spaceflights launched from right here in Cape Canaveral. The Space Force has also engaged with our allies and partners to enhance cooperation in space. We have now seen them place a higher priority on this domain as well. The UK, which announced the creation of a Space Command last month, and France, which had adjusted from the Air Force to now having the French Air and Space Force. Through all of this, the Space Force has continued delivering new capabilities for the United States. In fact, in August, the National Aeronautics Association recognized our X-37B spaceplane with one of its most prestigious awards, a distinction also given to Orville Wright and the Apollo 11 team. Structurally, we have created a new and leaner field organization comprised of 3 field commands and 9 space deltas that cover missions such as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, space electronic warfare, and space domain awareness. The Space Force's success thus far are reflected in its people. Since its founding, it has grown substantially, which is a trend we expect to continue. Over the last 3 months, more than 2,100 members have transferred from the Air Force into the Space Force. We anticipate that an additional 3,700 airmen skilled in fields such as intelligence, acquisition, engineering, and cyber will transfer in the next 3 months. These men and women have great leadership in General Raymond, who will become a statutory member soon of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. With the right people and leadership in place, we are focused on cultivating the culture of the service. In this respect, we have also made great strides. For example, just 7 months after the Space Force was established, the service released the Space Capstone publication, its first doctrine document. This is a military service's fundamental responsibility because it articulates their unique purpose, identity, and operational mindset, and it informs the joint doctrine. Significantly, the Space Capstone publication identifies space power as a distinct form of military power that is vital to U.S. prosperity and security. The Space Force's motto, Semper Supra, captures their role well. Safeguarding U.S. advantages in the ultimate high ground requires them to be always above. Next, I'll provide an update on U.S. Space Command. Just as we have at sea, it is important to establish responsible standards and norms in space. U.S. Space Command is promoting these efforts and calling out those, like Russia, who violate these standards and norms. In August, we welcomed General Dickinson to the helm through U.S. Space Command's first change of command ceremony. He made history by becoming the first Army general to lead the combatant command. I should note that his predecessor, General Raymond, had served in a dual capacity, Chief of Space Operations and Commander of U.S. Space Command. The Department is grateful to General Raymond for stepping up to serve in these 2 consequential roles. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't share the progress the Department has made within the Pentagon. In June, we released a new defense space strategy. Over the next 10 years, this document will guide the Department in achieving our desirable conditions for a space domain that is secure, stable, and accessible. Similar to our national defense strategy, we pursue our objectives through 4 lines of effort. These are: build a comprehensive military advantage in space, integrate space into national, joint, and combined operations, shape the strategic environment, and cooperate with allies, partners, industry, and other government departments and agencies. If you have not done so and had a chance to read it yet, I would encourage you all to do so. It will give you a clear sense of how the Department's thinking has evolved on space from a policy perspective. This defense space strategy served as a part of our Department's contribution to the development of the new National Space Policy, which we are proud to support. Another indication of our prioritization of space was creating an Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy. I established this office in response to the bipartisan fiscal year 2000 National Defense Authorization Act and to fulfill your due out, Mr. Vice President, when you announced the Space Force in August 2018. Congress rightfully identified civilian oversight of the space enterprise as an area of necessary change. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy will now be responsible for interagency coordination and international engagement on space policy and strategy. With this elevated level of leadership, we will bring heightened focus to the space domain as we prepare for long-term strategic competition and ensure alignment with the Space Force and U.S. Space Command. In conclusion, the Department of Defense has had a significant and successful past 7 months. We remain committed to continuing this important transformation of our national security space program, which just prepares us for deterring the high-end fight. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Norquist. And again, I know I speak on behalf of the President and everyone on the National Space Council and our Secretaries of Defense over the last 4 years when I say how grateful we are. You are the get it done guy at the Pentagon, and thanks for getting it done so quickly and standing up our United States Space Force and in all the ways that you've described. Someone else who deserves a tremendous amount of credit is I want to call on for maybe just a few brief reflections following the Deputy Secretary's remarks. He's a former commander of the United States Strategic Command, led forces in Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, led and commanded Air Force Space Command, and now, fortunately, we arrive at a time in the moment in our history when, as we are standing up American military leadership in space, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff brings a lifetime of dedication and experience to America's military security in space. So let me invite all gathered here first to thank General John Hyten for his lifetime of service, and General Hyten, any reflections that you have on this first year of the United States Space Force. General Hyten, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have a million reflections. To choose from everything that's going through my mind right now is nearly impossible, because this is an exciting time. This is an important time. But it's a time that, as Director Ratcliffe clearly pointed out, we have a threat. And what we're doing and what we have been doing is about how do we respond to that threat. And the partnership we have with the intelligence community is as strong as it's ever been. And I was so excited to hear the concept of the Space Force being the 18th member of the intelligence community. That presents so many opportunities for us to do things in much better ways of how we do surveillance, how we do intelligence. All those things open up by just that simple idea. So as I sit here, I'll just say that Space Command and the Space Force have two basic functions. When you look at the Saturn V that's above us, you like to look up and dream. And I was involved in the previous edition of the United States Space Command, and I'll say that command really liked to look up. And we need to look up, and we need to surveil, and we need to understand the threat. And you heard the Vice President and the Director of National Intelligence talk about the Russian threat that we watch very closely through the partnerships we have with our own sensors, with the intelligence community sensors, so we know exactly what's going on and exactly what they're doing. But the reason the United States military is in space is really to look down and make sure that our planet is safe, and that we support the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, all of the elements of our national security, support the joint force and make sure that it is secure. And if you look at everything that we do every day, and you heard the deputy talk about the amazing organizational changes that are under, but actually it's the mission and the people that do that mission every day that are the key piece of it. And you just look back in January when missiles were launched from Iran into al-Assad in Iraq, and you look at the warning that was provided immediately from the operators in the United States Space Command that allowed people to take cover, and the exquisite indications and warning that were put together by Space Command people, Space Force people, working together with the intelligence community to make sure that no American died in that attack. That's a remarkable piece. So, Mr. Vice President, thank you for your leadership. It is actually a joy to work with you in any meeting I've ever been in. And I want to say that I look forward to the future. You know, the one thing about all 4 stars, General Raymond, is that we're all circling the drain. You know, we're all pretty much done. But the other thing about all of us is, man, wouldn't you like to go back and be a second lieutenant in the United States Space Force today and do it all over again? That would be exciting. So, Mr. Vice President, thank you.
General John Hyten, everybody. I think it's worth noting for the record that I gave him absolutely no notice prior to those remarks. I think you can hear the heart and the mind of someone who's been absolutely committed for a lifetime to American security in space. And as I've said to you before, General Hyten, I can't help but feel that for such a time as this, you're Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So thank you for your stalwart leadership and a lifetime of service. Join me in thanking General Hyten one more time. Closer to home on security, and I apologize that I didn't give him any notice at all, the acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I've come to know him over the last 4 years of service, and have been deeply inspired at his implementation of American law, security on our border. But the members of the National Space Council deserve to know that under Acting Secretary Chad Wolf's direction, the Department of Homeland Security has also been working to increase outreach to the private sector to ensure cybersecurity in space systems, which is of equal importance to our economy, to the privacy of the American people. So for a few minutes of reflections on the progress, the efforts DHS has made, join me in thanking Acting Secretary Chad Wolf, member of the National Space Council.
Well, let me start off by, again, expressing my gratitude, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership of the Council, as all of our Council members have said today. The work that not only you, but the staff have done over the last 4 years in advancing American leadership in this area, I think, is a testament. The Department of Homeland Security, as you said, is hard at work at helping to implement the national space policy in two primary areas, and that's in cybersecurity and resilience. And so what we call the left of launch, or before launch, is a critically important time. Cybersecurity and supply chain security of space systems is paramount. And to support this effort, the department is leveraging our relationships and our processes with critical infrastructure owners and operators around the country through our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. And CISA is leading the newly established Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or ISAC. And that's a forum for U.S. government and private industry can share information and best practices, and we do that through a number of other industries as well. We are also partnering with our colleagues at the Department of Commerce, Secretary Ross and others, to engage more small and innovative companies wanting to engage in this area as well. After launch, or to right of launch, as we say, DHS is leading in the testing, the resilience of federal and critical functions through the exercising of continuity of operation practices. These left of launch and right of launch approach will increase the security of our homeland, will certainly broaden our private sector and international partnerships, and will support the important work of the American space activities. So let me just close by, again, thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership for this council, and the department stands ready to support its ongoing work. So thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thanks for the kind words, and thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your leadership, Mr. Secretary. We couldn't be more grateful. I'm going to get a couple of people, put a couple more people on the spot who've played just a leading role in our ability to move out on the policies that have been advancing our economy and our security. Brooke Collins is the director of the President's Domestic Policy Council, and Russ Vought is the head of the Office of Management and Budget. And I can tell you that over the course of the last 4 years, both of them have been consistent partners in our effort to identify the resources on the security front and in reviving human space exploration here at NASA, but also in promoting the vital role that American leadership in space has played in our economy, as the Secretary has reflected momentarily. I also want to recognize Brooke Collins because while we are here at the Kennedy Space Center, we are on the Space Coast with Lieutenant Governor Nunez and a lot of proud Floridians. Texas likes to boast of their long history in space in Houston, and Brooke Collins is a daughter of Texas and Council Lone Star State home. So thanks for bringing all that natural Texas passion to your efforts on behalf of space. So I'm going to recognize Brooke Collins, Domestic Policy Council, and then the Director of OMB before we turn our attention to national space policy and to the Director of NASA's report. Brooke?
Well, this is unexpected, Mr. Vice President, but thank you. It will only be 1 minute, and thank you for the shout out to Texas. It's great to be here in Florida as well. I am struck as I sit here as the mother of 4 children. I know everyone's sitting in the room and watching in the audience and watching on TV at how inspiring that this group led by our president and also you, Mr. Vice President, we have reignited America's imagination. And for the young girl or young boy from the plains of Texas or from the coast of Florida or from the cornfields of Indiana, that one day they too could go to space, to the final frontier, and to reach for the stars. And that is America. And so what an honor it is to be a part of this. And thank you for your leadership and for everyone here today. Thank you.
Director of the Office of Management and Budgets, a man I've known for many years, and he is a tight-fisted steward of the public treasury. But I want to take this opportunity to thank Director Russ Vought for finding a way for the largest increases in NASA's budget in the modern era, and for also finding a way to make sure that our standing up the United States Space Force had the resources necessary. So, Mr. Director, thank you, and we'd welcome any remarks you'd have for the National Space Council today. Director Russ Vought, the Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It is a privilege to be back here. And budgets are about priorities. And one of the things that this administration under the President and your leadership has been insistent upon from the very beginning is that we're going to get back to space. We are overjoyed that we've been able to increase the budget by 15%. Right now we're in the midst of hard-fought negotiations to get our 12% increase to make sure that we have the resources to get back to the moon and Mars and beyond. But I want to build off of what Brooke said, and that is to get to... But I want to build off of what Brooke said in terms of the national momentum that's been built around getting back to the moon and staying there. I've got 2 little girls, a 6-year and 8-year-old, and when there's extra cardboard around the house, they're building rockets. They've got pictures of astronauts in their room, and on Saturdays we change the channel from the football game to watch the launches. And so you are getting a sense nationally of the momentum that's building as a result of the leadership of the President and the Vice President, the Space Council, the important work of Jim Bridenstine. And we're excited at OMB to play a behind-the-scenes role to get the resources that are necessary to bring agencies together, to build consensus, to make sure that documents and regulations go out that reflect all one view of the administration. And I thank you for the honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Director Russ Vought. Thanks for your efforts, and thank you for that. Thank you for talking to us about your little girls. I think it's one of the points you make, one of the points Brooke made is that having revived America's commitment to human space exploration and innovation, rededicating ourselves to American leadership in space for our national security, I can't help but feel that it's going to inspire kids to pursue STEM education and to have their eyes on the stars. So thank you both for those without any notice remarks. Very inspiring. I'm going to ask Dr. Scott Pace, who has been the Executive Director of the National Space Council over the last 4 years, has been my right arm throughout this effort to come forward. Today, President Donald Trump signed an updated national space policy for the United States of America, just in time for this 8th meeting of the National Space Council. And I've asked Dr. Pace to give us a very brief update. You all should have a copy, and for those of you looking on, the new national space policy of the United States of America will be available online for all of the country to review. But Dr. Pace, maybe you could just update members of the council on the policy and specifically how it differs from previous space policy at this important moment in the life of this program and in the life of the United States Space Force. But before I do that, I do want to give all of you a chance. We are only as good as the people who are behind us, supporting us, advising us, informing us. And I must tell you, it's been one of my great privileges over these past 4 years to enjoy the friendship, but the extraordinary professionalism and guidance of Dr. Scott Pace. So would all the members of the National Space Council join me in showing our appreciation for Scott Pace for the great job you've done.
Thank you, sir. And as several people have heard me say in speeches, there's nothing more terrifying than having a boss who cares about what you do. Your caring and the caring of the President have been absolutely instrumental to whatever progress we've been able to make. With the strong leadership from the President and your National Space Council staff has been working closely with all the members of the Space Council to develop the new national space policy. I promise not to read it. It's rather thick, and it's there in front of you. And I wanted to take the opportunity to express my personal thanks and appreciation to the members of the Interagency Working Group that contributed to this policy. About 11 agencies, 5 White House councils. There's a lot of folks who are part of this effort, and as well as the thoughtful advice from the members of the Users Advisory Group. The National Space Policy is the President's direction to U.S. government departments and agencies to advance the interests of the United States in space for the benefit of the American people. And this policy outlines fundamental principles of the United States regarding its activities in space and details future goals and executive branch tasks to achieve them. The policy reaffirms the nation's interest to act responsibly in space to ensure safety, stability, security, long-term sustainability of space activities. And as such, it's similar to past policies in that it reflects long-standing efforts that extend back decades, the beginning of the space age, while recognizing new challenges and new opportunities in front of us. The National Space Policy at top level gives primary emphasis to 4 topics: commercial space activities, international cooperation, exploration, science, and national security, which undergirds everything we do. And the policy expresses the nation's commitment to leadership in space. The major point I wanted to make, as we have heard around today, is that the international environment we're in is very dynamic. It's influenced by competition and threats to the space capabilities on which we rely. And consequently, it's important that the U.S. space activities across all sectors, civil, commercial, and national security, be coordinated at the highest levels in an integrated manner to advance our national interests and those of our allies and partners. A policy of sustainable space exploration and development depends on an alignment with enduring national interests such as security, economic growth, scientific advancement, and a stable international environment. Space does not exist for its own sake. It exists to serve the interests of the nation, and our alignment with those interests is crucial to our success. Establishing U.S. capabilities to operate routinely out to the moon and beyond will deliver strategic assets not only for ourselves, but for all like-minded nations who share our values: liberty, democracy, rule of law, free market economic principles. It is our values we carry with us into space, not merely our machines. Space exploration and development are not confined to one-time missions or any single destination. Closer to home, the United States is going to encourage commercial activities to lower the public burden of maintaining and enhancing space capabilities. And as the United States journeys again into deep space, it will do so with commercial and international partners. And at the frontiers of exploration, the United States will continue to lead, as it always has done. The United States is leading in space, but we also face determined competitors and adversaries. The President's national space policy continues the quest to explore and develop the unknown while securing benefits for the American people, which has driven our country since its founding. This drive, rooted deeply in the spirit of the United States, will ensure that as humanity expands into space, it will be the home of a free people. With that, Mr. Vice President, thank you for the opportunity, and be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Pace. And the National Space Policy of the United States, I was there Literally, when the staff secretary brought this into the president late yesterday, I know people worked around the clock on an interagency basis to get this completed before the 8th meeting of the Space Council. And where might people be able to review this today? We'll make sure it's on whitehouse.gov. But
I'm pleased to say the White House Digital Services has been great, and it's available online.
Okay, available online, National Space Policy, and would recommend it to the attention of any American interested in a broad outline of what our priorities are and what our objectives are with regard to American leadership for our economy and our security in space. But thank you so much, Dr. Pace, for the report, and but another round of applause for really a tireless public servant and all the work he's done. Finally, we will now turn our attention to NASA's activities with a report and a very exciting announcement today from the administrator of NASA, Jim Bridenstine. Many of you may not be aware that prior to serving as the 13th administrator of NASA, Jim Bridenstine was a Navy pilot, flew combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, flew more than 1,900 hours. I first met him when he was a congressman from Oklahoma, serving on the House Armed Services Committee. But very early on, it was apparent to President Trump that this was a man who had a deep passion for American leadership in space. And I must tell you that when I think of all the progress that we've made in reviving American leadership in human space exploration, when I think of the historic steps that we have taken in the last 4 years to ensure American military dominance in space as much as on land and sea and air, I am truly grateful, as I know the President of the United States is, for the service and tireless efforts and enthusiasm of the 13th Administrator of NASA. Join me in thanking Jim Bridenstine for all that he's done and for the important announcement today.
Wow. Standing ovation from the Vice President of the United States. I will tell you, sir, it's been the joy of my life to serve this little agency called NASA that does just amazing things. I will also say, and sir, I know you've heard it today all day long from all of the people sitting around this table, but this has been a game-changing administration as it relates to space. From day one, this administration came in committed and not just giving it lip service, but moving out on it. And you're hearing it not just from me, but from everybody around this table who has served with and for you, sir. And your leadership here has been astonishing. I have said, and I'll keep saying it, one of the best things President Trump did was reestablish the National Space Council. And right after that, putting his #1 guy, the Vice President of the United States, in charge of it. And it's been just a real pleasure serving on this council with you, sir. So I'll go through kind of where we are with the Artemis program, which of course is our return to the moon, not just with the next man, but with the first woman, which was a very direct order from the Vice President of the United States, who is carrying out the direction of the President of the United States. And so here's where we are, sir, and I'm very pleased to report the core stage of the SLS rocket is complete. It is at the Stennis Space Center being tested. All 4 RS-25 engines have been integrated, and we have now completed 6 of the 8 tests for what we call the green run. Right now we are in the midst of the 7th test, which we call the wet dress rehearsal. And of course the next test after the wet dress rehearsal is, no kidding, a live fire test of all 4 RS-25 engines. So we are very excited to be where we are. The SLS rocket, of course, is the moon rocket. I know we're sitting underneath a Saturn V, and this, of course, reminds us of the history, but we are here today talking about the future. And I want to assure my friend, the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, that Saturn V is very secure. So we are not going to need a new DNI today, and I made sure of that. So I do think it's important to note that the SLS rocket, Mr. Vice President, is back on track and moving forward. The Orion crew capsule is complete. It has gone through environmental testing. We have done the launch abort testing, which is also complete and has been successful. It is mated to the European Service Module, and of course it is here at the Kennedy Space Center waiting for some more processing. So that again is good news. As we move forward, one of the big things that you gave us direction to do, and this was at the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, was to make sure that we partnered with freedom-loving countries. And we have done that. We put together the Artemis Accords, which establishes what are the norms of behavior, what are the things we expect our partners in space exploration to do as we explore space together. And so we wrote out the Artemis Accords. We had great support from the State Department. I want to really tip my hat to what the State Department did. The Artemis Accords are complete. We're looking for transparency from all of our international partners. We're looking for interoperability. We're looking to make sure that if there are astronauts in distress, we all support each other. We're looking to make sure that the future of space exploration is peaceful. And all of this was enshrined in the Artemis Accords. And of course, one of the reasons to do all of this is because when we go to the moon this time, it's going to be with international partners, which we didn't have last time, but also this time we're going to have commercial partners. And we need to have the processes by which we can all agree to explore the moon safely, both with commercial and international partners, as the United States of America leads this coalition to the moon and eventually onto Mars. I want to be clear, we already have 9 countries that have signed up, 9 freedom-loving countries that signed up, and we just announced the Artemis Accords earlier this year. There are more countries that we're talking to every day that are interested, but here's the thing, and this is my experience as the NASA administrator. Everybody loves Artemis. All of our international partners want to be part of the Artemis program. That gives us a great tool of soft power to say, we want you with us, but when you come with us, there are basic standards of behavior that we need you to abide by, and all of those standards, by the way, are enshrined in the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. So all of that is very positive. The Gateway, our little, it's not really a space station, but it's an outpost around the moon, but it's going to give us the extra energy that we need to get to low lunar orbit, to the surface of the moon, and then back to the Gateway. The Gateway is under development. We are rapidly moving forward on the Gateway. The power and propulsion element and what we call HALO, which is Habitation and Logistics Outpost, is under development. We're going to put those two together. We're going to launch them on a single rocket, and we're going to do that by the year 2023. So the Gateway will be underway by 2023. We're also very excited that the Gateway, in fact, and this is for Dr. Drogemeyer, we've already selected 2 science experiments to be on the Gateway in orbit around the moon, and those 2 science experiments have to do with space weather and the radiation of deep space. So this is going to enable us to get more science than we could otherwise get, and of course we all know Dr. Drogemeyer. He mentioned Oklahoma earlier. Dr. Drogemeyer comes from Oklahoma, very amazing weather scientist, and now expanding that field all the way to space weather. So we're there with you, sir, and we'll keep moving forward on that. We think about our European partners. Recently signed an MOU with us on the Gateway. So we can very proudly say that when we go to the moon, we have already got commitments from the European Space Agency, not only to have astronauts with us, but also to provide hardware that is going to be very significant for our sustainable return to the moon. So we have also opened up the aperture a little bit when we go to the moon. One of my first initiatives, Mr. Vice President, as you know, was we're going to go commercially, as directed by you and the President of the United States. So we initiated the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program to take NASA payloads to the surface of the moon. where we buy a service. We don't own and operate the hardware, but we buy a service. We now have a number of companies that have signed up to be part of this program. Sir, you mentioned earlier that we're going to actually buy some of that regolith on the moon. We're going to buy resources, and we're going to prove that this is a model of operations that is workable. And of course, the Artemis Accords are a big part of that as well. I saw Sean Mahoney is here from Aston Space Systems. I think Secretary Ross, you mentioned Astrobotic. So there are a lot of small, innovative, impressive companies raising money and moving out because of the policies that we've put in place to go to the moon commercially. So all of that is very exciting. Finally, I'm gonna anchor real quick on the human landing system, which of course we have the SLS rocket, we have the Orion crew capsule, we have the European service module, we have the Gateway. The one thing we have not had since 1972 is a human landing system. And now we have, Mr. Vice President, because of your leadership and the leadership of the President, we have a human landing system funded for the first time since 1972. We have 3 companies, yes. We have 3 companies that are under contract. There's a lot of companies involved, I want to be clear, but 3 prime contractors that will be leading the efforts for the human landing system. We're in a base period right now where we're looking at how we're going to land on the moon. And ultimately, by February of 2021, we're looking to do a down select from 3 to 2 so that we can come to a resolution on how we're going to land on the moon by 2024. Now, I want to be clear when I talk about the human landing system, Mr. Vice President, the budget request, thank you to the Director of OMB, Russ Vogt. The budget request gave us what we needed to achieve a 2024 moon landing. And as of right now, this agency is meeting all of its milestones. Yes. We are in the midst of, as the Director of the Budget has said, we're in the midst of negotiating to get that lander funded. The bill passed in the House, funded it to the tune for 2021 about $600 million in the Senate. It was about $1 billion. Now, $1 billion is a lot of money, and I want to be really clear. We are so grateful for the bipartisan support for this. That's one of the biggest things that we have to have moving forward. This has to be generational in nature, which means strong bipartisan support is necessary, and we're grateful for that. But ultimately, if we don't get the $3.3 billion, it gets more and more difficult. So I'm making sure to communicate, as I do always, to our legislators. If there's anything you can do to help with the $3.3 billion, we are certainly asking for that. Sir, I've been told we're going to show a video here, but I can see, did you have anything to say before we go to the video?
Well, I think we've got a very exciting announcement coming up, but I just couldn't be more grateful. For those of you looking on that are just now taking an interest in the program, we are beneath an Apollo Saturn V rocket, but we're about to see a major and historic step in setting into motion in one more way the Artemis program and the Artemis rockets that will take to the skies over the next several years and on to the moon and ultimately to Mars. I want any school children looking on to know that Artemis is the twin of Apollo, except Artemis is going to go a lot farther and inspire the world once again. So join me in thanking Administrator Jim Bridenstine, and then we'll move on to a very exciting announcement.
The Apollo missions were a daring success
and highlighted what a generation of ambition can accomplish.
We choose to go to the moon, but in a whole new way.
Not as a destination, but as a beginning.
And not alone, but with a global coalition of explorers.
This calling is part of what makes us human.
And it is this generation's turn to set the tone.
We are going
to lead a journey of discovery that benefits our planet with life-changing science.
To use the moon and its resources as a technology testbed to go even farther.
To learn how to establish and sustain a human presence beyond Earth.
This time, we're going as the Artemis generation.
We will discover, prove that it's possible,
and bring all that we learned back home.
To benefit all of humanity.
And then we will take the next giant leap.
Mars.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to the Artemis generation.
Welcome to the Artemis generation. A lot of you in this room, you've heard me talk about the Artemis generation. I'm the first NASA administrator in history that wasn't alive when we had people living and working on another world. And of course, it is our goal that I'm the last NASA administrator in history that wasn't alive when we have people living and working on another world. Our goal is to go to the moon sustainably, to learn how to live and work on another world so that ultimately we can take all of that knowledge onto Mars. And the Vice President of the United States came to the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, and what he said to us at that time was he directed us to make sure that we go back to the moon, this time sustainably, and we go back to the moon with the next man and the first woman. And that's what this program is all about. And today we have this very special and unique milestone where it is time to announce who those people will be. And Mr. Vice President, if you would come up to the front here and share with the audience who our astronauts are going to be. This is the first cadre of our Artemis astronauts. I want to be clear. There's going to be more. And of course, there's going to be astronauts that are in low Earth orbit that are going to go to the moon, and astronauts that go to the moon that are going to be in low Earth orbit. But Mr. Vice President, please do us the honor of introducing who these folks are, and you'll see on the video their images when he announces them.
Thank you, Jim. It's now my honor to announce the names of the Artemis astronauts who will take us back to the moon and beyond. Joe Acaba. Kayla Barron. Raja Chari. Matthew Dominic. Victor Glover. Woody Hoberg. Johnny Kim. Christina Cook. Kjell Lindgren. Nicole Mann. Ann McLean. Jessica Meir. Jasmine Mogbeli. Kate Rubens. Frank Rubio. Scott Tingle. Jessica Watkins. And Stephanie Wilson. And now it's my special honor to welcome 5 members of the Artemis generation who are here with us today at the Kennedy Space Center. Jessica Watkins. Matthew Dominic. Ann McLean. Joe Akaba. And Jessica Meir. My fellow Americans, I give you the heroes of the future who will carry us back to the moon and beyond, the Artemis generation. Well, thank you all for stepping forward and for the excellence that you've shown throughout this program. And congratulations to you and all of those that were just named that are part of the Artemis generation. It really is amazing to think that the next man and the first woman on the moon are among the names that we just read, and they may be standing in the room with us right now. We started today reflecting on a great hero of the past. The Artemis generation are the heroes of American space exploration in the future. Would you join me in showing our appreciation for their great heroism and their character one more time? Well, thank you all. We're going to wrap up very quickly here, this 8th meeting of the National Space Council. With gratitude to these heroes who stepped forward, and let me just say a personal note of gratitude to all of the dedicated men and women and the staffs who stepped forward to serve the National Space Council over the last 4 years. I think you could tell today in just summary fashion the extraordinary difference for our economy and for our security that the National Space Council, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, has made in renewing American leadership in space. And join me in thanking all the members of the National Space Council one more time. Would you please? I also want to take the opportunity to thank members of the User Advisory Group. This is an extraordinary group of Americans that come from the very heart of the American space enterprise. And they brought their incredible professionalism and their incredible experience to bear on ensuring that we had the very best guidance to take the steps necessary to promote and expand America's space enterprise. There are a few that are with us here today. And first, I want to thank from afar Admiral Jim Ellis, who has led the User Advisory Group of the National Space Council with such great distinction. Join me in thanking Admiral Jim Ellis for his great work. There are 28 members of the User Advisory Group that have given us great counsel all along the way. They've dedicated countless hours to giving us their very best advice. A few are actually with us here today for this 8th meeting of the National Space Council. So in addition to Admiral Ellis, allow me to thank Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez of the great state of Florida. Thank you for your contributions to the space program. Eric Stallmer, who is with us here today, who is a great space entrepreneur and pioneer. Thank you so much, Eric. Another great space entrepreneur who's been leading the way and has become a great champion of American leadership in space, Fatih Osman and his wonderful wife. Thank you for your great leadership. And to a great entrepreneur who brought great business acumen to this, and the great counsel of his wife, Judy, has assisted all along the way. Join me in thanking Indiana's own Fred Klepsch for his contributions to the National Space Council. I come to this 8th meeting of the National Space Council just with a heart filled with gratitude. I'm humbled by the efforts of all of those that are gathered here. The military leadership from the Department of Defense, Secretary Barrett, General Raymond, General Hyten, and others who have stepped forward to really transform the commitment of our nation to ensuring the security of the American people from space, but also the vitality of America's ideals in space for generations to come. But I know I speak on behalf of the President as well when I just express my appreciation for all the members of this administration who caught the same vision. I love what Dr. Pace said a few moments ago. He said there's nothing more terrifying than having a boss who cares about what you're doing, has an interest in what you're doing. And all I can say is I can relate. I'll never forget the day, Jeanette. It was when we were campaigning for this job 4 years ago that I got a phone call. I was on my way to the Space Coast. And then our candidate called me up and he said he wanted to revive something called the National Space Council. And he wondered if I'd be willing, as other vice presidents had done in the past, to be willing to chair it. And so there have been many kind words expressed for your vice president today, but let me invite all of you to thank President Donald Trump and all of those that have served alongside him for renewing American leadership in space. And as I close this meeting and in the company of these extraordinary Americans, let me just also say that I think the best days for American leadership in space are yet to come. And I know with the caliber of the men and women that have stepped forward in this program, Artemis, that we're going to make all new history. We're going to fill up places like this again and again. And I just want to assure all of you that we'll be carrying America's aspiration and ideals into the great unknown, that you go with the confidence of the American people. You will have the support of people all across this country as you inspire the world. And I'm very confident that you will go with the prayers of tens of millions of Americans who are grateful for your courage and your service and the service of all of those that we announced today as part of the Artemis generation. And my prayer will be in those ancient words that you would be confident that as you rise on the wings of the dawn, settle on the far side of the sea, but as the good book says, even if you go up to the heavens, my prayer is that you know that even there his hand will guide you and his right hand will hold you fast. So join me in thanking the Artemis generation, the National Space Council, our user advisory group, and every American who has contributed to this cause these past 4 years. Because of all of you, America is leading in space once again, and we will be leading for generations to come. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
At NASA, we have always answered the innate call to go.
With Artemis,
we are going to stay.
Proving that humanity
can live on the moon,
Mars, and other worlds.
And share the wonders of the solar system with all.
Our story is one of people.
All those who make this journey possible.
From advocates across communities,
to companies across industries,
to countries around the world.
We achieve
this collective endeavor.
Our efforts create impact for all.
Technologies that revolutionize industries.
And jobs that bring prosperity to people.
The discoveries from space
benefit the way we live on Earth today.
And those from the moon
will create a better future
for generations to come. But to do that,
we must go.
Hi, I'm Chell Lindgren. My name is Raja Chari.
Kayla Barron.
Kate Rubens.
Hi, I'm Christina Cook.
NASA astronaut Joe Acaba.
Jessica Amir.
Woody Hoberg.
Ann McClain. Stephanie Wilson.
My name is Johnny Kim.
Nicole Mann.
Victor Glover.
Jessica Watkins.
Hi, I'm Matthew Dominic.
Jasmine Morbelli.
Frank Rubio.
Scott Tingle.
This is what we do.
This is what we will do.
Let's go.
We go to the moon to learn how to live on other planets.
For the benefit of all. Going to space is awesome. My first flight was on the space shuttle. You get into the vehicle, you're all strapped in. You know, we have the countdown timer that's going on. You get to 0 and the launch begins. In your mind, you're thinking, I can't believe this is actually happening. It's the coolest experience ever.
Hola, Joseph. ¿Es tu padre?
Hey, Pops. It's good to hear your voice. Thanks for the support. The launch was awesome.
When I look back to who inspired me, it started with my grandfather. He actually had the old films of the Apollo missions that we would watch. I've been fortunate that I've had those mentors that have supported me and motivated me to be where I am today. I was born in Southern California, reading, playing sports, enjoyed being outdoors, spent some time in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, was a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer, did a lot of different jobs until I found the one that I felt was the most important job on the planet, which is being a school teacher. It was one of the jobs I never thought I would leave until I was given this opportunity to become a NASA astronaut.
NASA astronaut Joe Acaba making his third flight into space.
I've had the opportunity to go on 3 space missions, and I've spent about 306 days in space to actually walk on the moon. For me, to have that as a possibility is just incredible. This is our next step to explore places we have never been before.
All right, NASA family and friends, our first astronaut, Kayla Barron.
I think the thing that's most important to me is just the inspiration of exploration. I think we all have this innate sense to explore, whether you're the one who actually gets to step on the moon or not. I think it changes all of us to know that we can actually do things that would be unimaginable to the generations that came before us. 9/11 happened 8 days before my 14th birthday, so I was in 8th grade. And I was really inspired by how our country responded to that really tragic event. It really made me realize that I wanted to serve and commit myself to something that was bigger than just me. And there's a huge diversity of opportunities in the Navy, whether it's flying a plane, driving a surface ship, driving a submarine, being a doctor. And I spent a week with the submarine warfare community, including a day underway. And I was so impressed by the sailors on that submarine. They just seemed like the kind of people who would teach me how to be a good leader. For me, the dream of becoming an astronaut cemented itself pretty late in my life. I went back to the Naval Academy to work for Admiral Ted Carter. And because I was working with him, I got to go to all of these really cool events and meet a lot of people who I had no business talking to, really. I met one of his classmates, former astronaut Kay Heyer, and she was telling me about one of her shuttle missions where they were building the early space station. And I said, you know, that sounds a lot like a submarine in space. She looked at me and she was like, it totally is. That's exactly what it's like. And that was sort of the lightning strike moment. As a kid, I knew about astronauts. I watched shuttle launches on TV. I knew we were in space, but never seemed like something that I could do. But I had really good mentorship at that time. You know, I shared that dream with my boss, Admiral Carter. He turned to me and he said, Kayla, do you know how you become an astronaut? You apply. And for me, that was the perfect mentorship I needed in that moment. I'm somebody who thinks really hard about everything I do, all the details. And he said, you know, it's actually pretty simple. You just got to put yourself out there and you never know what's going to happen. So I did apply and it ended up working out. Here I am.
I think you're one of my favorite people.
For me, every time I have an NBL run or every time I do a practice spacewalk and you get in that suit, like we call it the EMU, and feel the gloves go on, feel the pressure build, feel the fans start to flow and the air start to come over the back of your head, and you realize, like, this is it. That's when it really strikes me that this is actually not a dream. This is actually happening.
I'm Raja Chari. I go by Grinder. I grew up in Iowa. I went to the Air Force Academy and then MIT, and then I was an Air Force test pilot.
If I ask my mom, she definitely has memories of me as a child talking about being an astronaut. Well, I always knew I wanted to do something related to aviation, but at the same time, I think I also started to tell myself it wasn't really possible because it was just something to get let down from. Every phase of my life I had doubt, whether it was at the Air Force Academy and wondering whether I could survive basic training, whether it was when I was at MIT or even pilot training, failing check rides, and thinking, again, maybe I'm on the wrong path. But I think in all those events, I've been blessed to have a supportive family, supportive spouse, supportive mentors and leaders who helped me at the time realize, like, hey, these are setbacks and you get better by tackling those head on. For the Artemis mission, they're not just PowerPoint slides. They're actually metals being bent, shaped, formed to build the things that we're going to use. And as a test pilot background, this is a dream job to actually be involved in all this. Now looking back, I would have told myself, hey, just pause and appreciate what's actually happening around you and the magic of the moment that you're in. Newton talks about, standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, I'm definitely not a giant, but if I can throw a little stepping stone out there, that would be my goal. My name is Raja Chari.
Very good. I like it. Go ahead.
Oh, what am I doing? We're videotaping this?
Everything you're doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, our newest astronaut, Matthew Dominic.
I think if you boil it down to it, I'm a father, a husband, and an explorer. For my whole life, I've always wanted to explore further. I didn't exactly know where I was going to go at any one time, but I always knew I wanted to go further or faster or higher. I remember as a kid going to air shows with my dad and just looking at airplanes, and I wanted to understand it, and so it was just drawn to it. Every air show I went to, I wanted to go get in that airplane.
I grew up in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. I went to the University of San Diego for electrical engineering and went to Naval Postgraduate School as well, naval test pilot.
It's certainly a sacrifice for family and friends. Being in the military, we would go on deployments and lose contact with them, and they understood the risk that we were taking. You think about the immense responsibility put on you at times. You don't want to let the world down, but it's about pushing humanity forward and keeping America safe. Watching rockets launch, right? I mean, watching shuttle launches as a kid was an enabler for me. It's like, how do I become a part of that? How do I join that team to go do that?
Godspeed to the class of 2017.
You find out you're getting this job, and that's huge. But really, that first time that you go put your hands into the gloves is just a very interesting moment. It's a pinch me moment. And you realize that this is real. This is going to happen. We're going. My previous job was to keep the world from going backwards. This job is about getting the world to go forwards.
Pojo brings a lot of energy to our team, and he is always definitely 100% in anything he does.
NASA astronaut Matthew Dominic.
My earliest idea of who I wanted to be growing up was my father. My father was a police officer, and so I wanted to be a police officer. And then I saw a shuttle launch on television, and I thought, I really want to drive one of those. And yes, I said drive because I didn't know any pilots or engineers even for that matter. I'm a public servant, and I have been for 22 years, since January of 1998. And so I ask myself, have I done all that I can for my country and for my family? I have fantasized about stepping on the moon. It's my dream. My dream is to work on the surface of the moon. And being able to launch humans from American soil is a very big part of that. I was sitting at my desk in the Russell Senate office building, and I got a phone call from a Houston phone number, and by the time I answered, I missed it. And so I called back, and after a lot of waiting and being transferred, I was transferred to Janet Kavandi, who was the chair of our board, and she asked me if I wanted to come to Houston and commence training. And I actually pinched myself several times walking back to my office. There is no way that this is a real thing. I'm gonna wake up and be so disappointed. When I woke up the next day, and I actually had an email from Janet saying it was not a dream. That was actually unreal.
He's a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, where he flew F-18s. He came to us from Washington, D.C., where he was serving as the United States Navy Legislative Fellow in the United States Senate. Victor?
Being selected for this job, you can't help but to think of, I've got so many friends that I know could do this job well. And that feeling of, wow, why didn't they get it? And, feeling like you're not really good enough cut out for the job. And I felt all of those things. Being a father, a husband, all of those things come with doubt. And I think you have to learn to get comfortable with the doubt. They call things moonshots when people accomplish something amazing. No matter how good a story you tell, people are captivated by real world accomplishment. It's our generation's opportunity to have our own literal moonshot, and then to continue inspiring future generations to reach for the moon.
They not only have the right stuff, they represent the full tapestry of American diversity. Their journey begins now, and the nation will be right beside them, reaching for the stars.
I actually thought that I was not experienced enough, didn't have the credentials I needed to actually become an astronaut.
The reason I'd want to go to space with Woody isn't just because he's brilliant, which he is, but it's because he carries his brilliance in such a way that you don't feel like you're an idiot when you're around him.
It's funny, all the little decisions in life that get you to where you're going. My earliest memories, I remember building little toys out of wood. Over time, got to building like 21-foot tall rockets, and one of those is still up at my parents' place, stored in their barn. I remember agonizing over what my major should be, and finally I sort of threw up my hands and said, I really like airplanes and things that fly, so I'll do aerospace engineering. One of the best decisions of my life was taking summers away from grad school to work search and rescue in Yosemite. One of my favorite parts of the job was getting thrown into situations where I wasn't quite sure what to do. The confidence I gained from that was that I can deal with the unexpected and adapt and overcome.
The other great thing about Woody is he applies that brilliance across all phases of his life, whether it's in the outdoors, where he basically saved half our class from getting severe hypothermia like it was no big deal. And then on his very first space station sim, nonchalantly directed the whole team through an emergency response like he'd done it 100 times.
I've always had a slight tension in me between sort of the engineer, analytical, problem-solving part of me and this sort of operational side of me that wanted to be out experiencing the world with my hands. I feel really lucky to be here now where I have an opportunity to do operational things but also solve really hard technical problems. When we go do hard things and challenge ourselves in that way, we will learn new things that will benefit us.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next newest astronaut, Woody Hoberg.
I'm an engineer, I'm a pilot, I'm a climber, and I'm now a NASA astronaut.
Ladies and gentlemen, the newest NASA astronaut, Jonathan Kim.
You're a Navy SEAL with a degree from Harvard Medical School.
Dr. Jonathan Kim.
That's just ridiculous.
Exploration is written in our human DNA. When I realized that being an astronaut is really the opportunity to expand our understanding of the cosmos, to make our world a better place, all while inspiring the next generation of children. You, Julian. The same children that didn't have the confidence to dream like I did. That was when I realized that I absolutely wanted to be an astronaut. Like a lot of immigrant families, my parents moved to America with the hope of the American dream that their children can have a better opportunity in this world. I had a hard time growing up as a kid. I lacked a lot of things, but the biggest thing I lacked was confidence. I wake up every day and I think about the opportunities I've had. It's hard for me to believe that I'm that same person.
No, you just beam, right? You spend so much effort and hope, and you try to give whatever the student needs to grow and get where they want to be. And then when you see that they get there, it's just thrilling.
It makes me immensely proud to be part of an organization to achieve such a monumental challenge like returning to the moon. And that's what really excites me when I think of Artemis. The lives that we're going to positively impact on this endeavor. It's hard to articulate all of those emotions, but it's wow. I am an astronaut, and I have this amazing opportunity to serve my country and humanity.
To me, he is service above self. I would trust my life to him, and I'm very proud to call him my friend.
Today's spaceflight will be the very first for NASA's Christina Cook.
We have to answer humanity's call to explore. We have to set ourselves as the leadership and proactively seeking out challenges and learning that when we focus on one thing and we focus on it together, we can achieve anything. I am someone who has loved exploration on the frontier since I was little. I used to be inspired by the night sky, and throughout my career, it's been this balance between engineering for space science missions and doing science in really remote places all over the world. I loved things that made me feel small, things that made me ponder the size of the universe, my place in it, and everything that was out there to explore. And I put that stuff to work making science gadgets for NASA space science missions and working really hard in that career, but also setting goals in hobbies that I had. I learned to rock climb, I learned to sail, finally learning surfing at this point in my life. And so I think working hard on all fronts to be a better person and to contribute the most to the world is really what's important to me. I really don't remember a time when I didn't want to be an astronaut. For me, I learned that if I was going to be an astronaut, it was because my passions turned me into someone that could contribute the most as someone contributing to human spaceflight. So I didn't necessarily live my life according to checkboxes of how you can become an astronaut, but I followed those passions and one year looked at who I had become and the skills I had gathered, and I asked, could I sit across from a table and present myself as someone who could do this well? And I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. You know, there was a moment where it came to me that this was the most exquisite personal and professional moment of my life, a moment of career culmination where everything I had learned personally, professionally, every skill I had been taught, every hero I had emulated, it was all coming together in this moment. And I realized that I wanted my work to tell every single person on Earth that they could have that moment too if they worked hard for it. And I wanted every single person on Earth to feel that same feeling.
I've had that dream of becoming an astronaut for as long as I can remember.
Next, the U.S. astronaut Kjell Lindgren
the 217th visitor to the International Space Station.
What a privilege to have had that experience, to live and work on the International Space Station. When you go out of the airlock and you start moving around on the outside of the space station, looking through that plastic visor at that scene that occupies your entire field of view, to see the Earth spinning quickly below is breathtaking. It was really watching the Space Shuttle Columbia launch in 1981. And that's really when I had that eureka moment that people actually do this. People go into space, and maybe that's something that I could pursue. I was accepted into the Air Force Academy, and it was there that I actually discovered a passion for biology, and specifically the effects of weightlessness on the human body. But I remember very clearly going into Denver one night and unfortunately seeing a young woman get hit by a car right in front of me while I was on the sidewalk. And I felt like, you know what, I've been studying biology, but I want to know more. I want to know what I would need to do to actually help this person. And so my path shifted a little bit, and I ended up going to medical school. I had the great fortune to be hired on as a flight surgeon, a physician that takes care of the astronauts, the crew. And then an astronaut selection was announced, and I threw my hat in the ring and had the great privilege of being selected into the 2009 astronaut class. We go to the moon because it means further building that bridge of knowledge that is required to get to Mars, and an expansion of humanity in the solar system. I'm grateful to be a part of this team. You know, getting to do this job is not an individual accomplishment. It represents effort and work of folks that have been walking alongside me, my family, classmates, colleagues, teachers, mentors, coaches. I am grateful for their investment of time and energy in helping me to achieve this goal.
I definitely have heroes. My first heroes would be my parents. They've taught me perseverance and discipline. They gave me that foundation I needed as a young woman to then move forward and achieve my dreams later on in life. I was fortunate enough to get accepted to the United States Naval Academy. It was the summer before my senior year at the Academy that I got a ride in an F-18. And that's the first time that I realized I can be a Marine and be a fighter pilot at the same time. This is the best of both worlds, count me in. And so I was selected to go to test pilot school. And it was during that time that I started looking at what are my future options going to be in the Marine Corps? What do I really want to do?
NASA says it's accepting applications for new astronauts.
Of the roughly 3,500 applicants NASA is expecting, only about 15 will be selected for training.
And I thought to myself, well, that's crazy. There's no way that I would ever be accepted to become an astronaut. And I went home and I spoke with my husband about it. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, why would you ever pass up such an incredible opportunity? If you never apply, you're never going to know if you could make it or if you could have made it. That really changed my perspective on life. So I applied to become an astronaut. And I was very fortunate enough to be selected in the class of 2013.
I'm thrilled to be joining the NASA team and looking forward to the next 2 years of training. Thank you.
And we've been training ever since, preparing to support current missions on board the International Space Station. And now we're preparing for the Artemis mission.
Just as the United States was the first nation to reach the moon in the 20th century, so too will we be the first nation to return astronauts to the moon in the 21st century.
Artemis and our mission to the moon is no longer some far-fetched dream or some science fiction idea. This is reality. We are going. What we're going to learn on the moon goes beyond space exploration. It benefits humans on Earth. It gives enthusiasm to our younger generation to go after their dreams and to help be a part of this evolution of our human race.
I think, if anything, I probably am a little bit of an impractical dreamer.
You know, be really unrealistic about your dreams, and just be really realistic about your path. When I was a little girl growing up in Spokane, Washington, becoming an astronaut, like nobody did that. There was nobody that I could look to and say, that person walked the path that I'm about to go walk. The first step I took out of Spokane was to go to West Point. That was a huge leap out of my comfort zone. As I was flying across the country for the first time ever going to New York City, I remember thinking, like, if I had the opportunity to get off this plane and not do this, I probably would have taken it. But you push through that. I remember sitting on the airplane and flying down to NASA for an astronaut interview, and I had the exact same feeling as when I was flying to West Point as an 18-year-old kid, and it was like, maybe this is where I've reached too far, maybe this is where I've pushed too far, this is where it all ends. What little girls from Spokane, Washington grew up to be an astronaut? I'm just not even going to try. And so when I say I'm an impractical dreamer, I mean, I never listened to that part of me that says, hey, you're probably not going to succeed at this. I always listened to the part that said, well, somebody's going to. Maybe it's going to be you.
We have liftoff of Anne McClain blasting through the Kazakh sky to the International Space Station.
You know, I've always been so focused on my goals, and I've always just sprinted toward those goals. And when I look back at all the achievements aren't actually what I remember, it's the people that I did them with. The person that wins the rugby match is the one that, despite all of those hits, despite all of the contact, actually thinks 10 steps ahead, thinks 5 steps ahead as a team, and it's a strategy game. Now, working here as an astronaut, one of the toughest things that we do are spacewalks. You have got to stay so mentally tuned in. You have to know that you can push your body further than you think you can. And I'm holding on to a handrail on the International Space Station, and I'm looking out at the vastness of space, and I looked back and I felt like this was my planet. I was attached to it through gravity, and I felt a closeness to the Earth, and I also realized how much more we have to explore. We haven't even started yet. Our destiny is always to go and see what's further and what's next.
I first started saying I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 5 years old. We were asked to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I distinctly remember drawing an astronaut in a spacesuit standing on the surface of the moon next to the American flag. People always associated space with me. They called me Space Girl. They knew that it was this ultimate passion that I had and this goal.
In this historic moment, first time that two women have done a spacewalk together.
I wrote this in my high school yearbook. And under future plans, I said to go for a spacewalk. Never forget that moment coming out the hatch and looking down and seeing just my boots and the earth below. And it was such a spectacular and beautiful sight.
I probably didn't have the most traditional path of becoming an astronaut. It was biology and understanding more about animals that really drove me. And so that's what I pursued. I'm always telling people everybody should be scuba divers. There's this whole world underwater that most people don't get to experience. And for me, being in space shares a lot of the similarities of that underwater world. You're traveling around and moving in a different realm. You have to trust in your hardware, trust in your equipment, and trust in all the people that have helped you get where you are. In my experience as a scientist diving underwater or working as an astronaut in space, you're challenged both mentally and physically at the same time. And I think those are the times when I've really felt the most content in my life.
The thing is, it just keeps getting better and better. From the moment I arrived on the space station, I've had a huge smile on my face.
Following your heart and following the things that you're passionate about, you can still achieve your dreams and your goals, and that's exactly what happened for me. I think I've always looked up at the moon and thought about what it would be like to be there. We're going to the moon to explore, and we're going to the moon for scientific discovery. I don't look at this as my own accomplishment or something just for me. This is our mission. This is everybody's mission. Our entire planet's really. I'm NASA astronaut Jessica Meir.
I still wake up every morning and it feels like a pinch me moment.
to think that I'm actually an astronaut right now. I am Jasmine Mogbelli. I think as a kid, I believed I could do anything. So to me, I was going to be in the NBA, I was going to be an astronaut, and I was going to be an Olympic skier. So to me, it didn't faze me. I've been very lucky to be surrounded by people that have always supported me. My husband, my parents, they 100% have supported me.
Jasmine Mogbelli.
As I started to overcome more challenges through my life, I realized, hey, I could possibly really do this. I think it's 100% natural to have doubt. What's important is how you respond to that doubt, and just let that be your driver to work harder and figure out a different way to do things. I think there are a lot of reasons for going to the moon. Our curiosity. Who in the world doesn't stare up at the moon and just wonder, while we've been there before, we've only explored a limited region of it. And so getting to learn more about the moon, I think not only can teach us more about Earth and our own planet, but also can set us up for going further and going to Mars. And when you talk about the way we want to go to the moon for Artemis, one, going to the lunar South Pole, just landing on that South Pole with the lighting conditions. There are permanent shadowed regions, so we can't use solar energy necessarily. What resources are on the moon that we can use? How much of them are there? How can we use a base from the moon to go further? Anything that might jeopardize the mission, whether I'm on it or not. Those are the things that kind of keep me up when I lay down at night, and those are the things that I think about. It's a deep question. Who am I? Well, I'm a wife now. I'm a daughter, my parents' favorite child, probably. I'm a Marine, and I'm an astronaut.
People ask you when you're a kid, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be an astronaut, a biologist, and a geologist. So, when you're 5, this seems totally reasonable. Studying microbiology on station is very similar to the Earth, except for you're floating. You may be doing the same experiment, but you're conducting it on the ceiling because that's a convenient place to work. We're studying things like sequencing DNA, what happens to the human body in space, and even viruses are an issue in space. I get really excited about things, and something about viruses, about biology, I'm totally fascinated by it, and I want to get up and go work on this every day.
Became the first person to sequence DNA in space. With the addition of NASA astronaut Kate Rubins, these 3 are about to begin the first planned to-orbit flight to the International Space Station with humans on board.
Space is both a place that is like this far off, almost fantastical thing that you think about and people dream about. But then on the other hand, to me, it's a home. I've been there. I've lived there for 6 months. I have friends there. I'm looking forward to going back there like you would look forward to visiting an old apartment. The moon is an incredible destination. We have been there, but we were there for such a brief period of time. Apollo, it united the world. And so to think, when we're having dark times, to think of the fact that we might have people on the planet able to look up and know that there's humans on the moon and that we've done this as a joint international collaboration. I can't even describe what kinds of the benefits that might be, both for our partnerships in the world and just for joy and inspiration in people's everyday lives.
Less than 10 minutes away from today's launch, this is Kate Rubins celebrating her birthday with a launch to the International Space Station.
I think if I was going to talk to my younger self, I would say, don't be so stressed out about what you're doing at the moment, because it's such an honor to be a scientist and to be an astronaut. Just enjoy what you're doing every day.
I'm a product of a lot of sacrifices and great teams. I'm a son of a teenage single mom. It was never an option to feel sorry for ourselves or to use that as a crutch. It was just, hey, you can do better, you can get ahead by working hard, studying hard. And so that kind of set a really good foundation of hard work equals results.
Good morning, Frank Rubio from Miami, Florida. Graduated from West Point, 98, Go Army, Black Hawk pilot, and then a family medicine physician.
The Army has essentially shaped me. I mean, it's given me all these amazing opportunities. The reality is I've just always been surrounded by people that are next level. Being around those type of people my entire career, I think has pushed me to do better and also kept me humble. When Vice President Pence was announcing our class, he made an analogy to a turtle on a fence post, basically meaning that, hey, you didn't get there on your own. He was talking, of course, about our families, our loved ones, our co-workers, our teams, essentially, that allowed us to succeed and get to that point in our lives.
Frank is truly a wonderful person. He is a great American, an even better human being, and he's going to make an awesome astronaut. And I really look forward and hope I get the chance to go to space with him one day.
What the moon will allow us to do is to explore further than we ever have before. Anytime we've explored in the history of mankind, there's great benefits from a technological point of view. But I think deeper than that, there's a sense of pride and unity that comes with accomplishing incredibly hard things. And right now, probably more than ever, as a nation and as a world, we need that. Watching how America comes together in those moments, in those bigger than life moments, is something that's really incredible to behold.
Right now, an American astronaut, a Japanese astronaut, and a Russian cosmonaut are strapped inside of a Soyuz spacecraft.
There's always the, why did you climb the mountain? Because it's there. We all travel down the street, we look out the window, we're in the backyard. There are moons out there. You can't miss it. It's beautiful. It's there every day. Why would we not want to go there? We need to go there.
1 minute, 10 seconds away from liftoff.
I was in junior high. The teacher asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And everyone was saying, I want to be a plumber, I want to be an architect, I want to be an accountant. And I said, I want to be an astronaut. And literally everyone in the class laughed. But then the teacher looked at me and said, right on.
And liftoff. Scott Tingle, Anton Shkaplerov, and Norishiki Kanai on their way to the International Space Station.
Look, this is evolution. We didn't always have the technology and the capability that we have today. We didn't always have automobiles. We weren't always able to just jump in a vehicle and travel for 16 hours and get to the other side of the country. So this is the next step in evolution, to be able to take systems and hone our processes and get our operations down so that we can set up camp on a place that's different from Earth so that we can conduct science that'll better humankind. This was just a dream when I first met my wife. You know, was it going to happen? Was it not going to happen? Who knows? But we're here and we're doing it. And every step we take is both a challenge and a reward. And to be able to live that life and look back at the track that we used to get here is it's just amazing. Life is pretty busy when you have lofty goals and you're constantly focused, you're constantly working to get positive results. But that moment for me was coming out of the Soyuz on my first space flight and standing on the ground for the first time in 6 months and realizing that I did it.
A dream feels like a big, faraway goal that's going to be difficult to achieve and something that you might achieve much later in life. But in reality, what a dream is, or a dream realized is just putting one foot in front of the other on a daily basis.
And if you put enough of those footprints together, eventually they become a path towards your dreams. My name is Jessica Watkins, and my fellow astronauts would describe me as a rock nerd, endearingly, as what I tell myself at least. One of the things that I enjoy the most about geology intellectually is you kind of function as a detective. You're looking at different puzzle pieces, all kind of in different places, and you're trying to bring those puzzle pieces together to get a full story, a full history of what has happened in a particular place. For me, as somebody who was really interested in the planets, geology provided a means for me to study the surface of another planet, and particularly look at Mars, which was my passion, was just super exciting to me. In college, I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to learn to play rugby. It was one of the best opportunities in my life, getting to play with the rugby team at Stanford and play in national championships and even win one. I think one of the biggest lessons that I take away from my rugby career is the importance of teamwork. Rugby in particular has positions that are all suited to different types of body types, different strengths that people bring to the table. And I think that is not unlike our team here at NASA, where everybody comes and brings their different strengths, their different expertise to form a powerful and winning team. This endeavor to go to the moon is going to be hard. It is not something that we can do individually. It's not something that we can do on our own. And I think especially in these times, it's really important for us to recognize how much we need each other and the importance of coming together for one goal. And I think that going back to the moon really embodies that.
This is Mission Control Houston. We are now processing telemetry from the Orion spacecraft.
Mission Specialist number 3, Stephanie Wilson.
Making her first flight into space. She'll sit in that seat right between and behind the pilot commander.
ATD, MS3, contact.
MS3, this is NTD. I've got you loud and clear. Good morning, Stephanie.
Go for maintain start.
Every space flight is special. The first space flight is very memorable for everyone. On the day of launch, everyone's very excited. And it's very surreal when the solid rocket boosters and the main engines ignite. It's very apparent that we're going somewhere, and it's the best 8.5-minute ride ever. The view from space is spectacular. It can be very peaceful, very serene. The colors are so vivid. The vibrant orange of the Sahara Desert, the blue-green color of the oceans. It's a wonderful sight to behold. And what is readily transparent is that while there may or may not be strife on Earth, it appears to us to be one unified planet. And having that perspective of one Earth and one humanity is one that we definitely appreciate having from space. I had a great curiosity for what's unknown, and I like to solve problems. So trying to understand and have a better sense of the universe and what that means to humanity, who we are, what our history is, and how we leverage that knowledge to bring benefits to humanity was something that struck me and I hope to work with in the future. I have certainly benefited by having some great mentors in the office across NASA. One thing that veterans of space flights do is they share their expertise and their experience during the mission.
Christina on the UIA, check oxygen EM1 and 2. Oxygen EM1 and 2 are open.
And I do my best to pass along the experience and the knowledge that I have gained to others in the office and with the next generation so that we can have a better future for all of humanity.
At NASA, we have always answered the innate call to go.
With Artemis,
We are going to stay.
Proving that humanity
Can live on the moon
Mars,
and other worlds.
and share the wonders of the solar system with all.
Our story is one of people.
All those who make this journey possible.
From advocates across communities
to companies across industries
to countries around the world.
We achieve this collective endeavor. Our efforts create impact for all.
Technologies that revolutionize industries.
And jobs that bring prosperity to people.
The discoveries from space
Benefit the way we live on Earth today.
And those from the moon
will create a better future
for generations to come.
But to do that,
we must go.
Hi, I'm Chell Lindgren.
My name is Raja Chari.
Kayla Barron. Kate Rubens. Hi, I'm Christina Cook.
NASA astronaut Joe Acaba.
Jessica Amir,
Woody Hoberg.
Anne McClain,
Stephanie Wilson,
My name is Johnny Kim.
Nicole Mann,
Victor Glover.
Jessica Watkins,
hi, I'm Matthew Dominic.
Jasmine Mokelly.
Frank Rubio.
Scott Tingle.
This is what we do.
this is what we will do.
Let's go.
we go to the moon to learn how to live on other planets.
For the benefit of all.
And welcome to the Apollo 5 Center here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Thank you so much for joining us. As you just saw in that video, the 18 astronauts from NASA that were named to the Artemis team is set. And we have 5 of them here with us today who are serving as ambassadors for that team. We appreciate you all being here with us for a conversation about what Artemis means, to get some reaction on you being named to that team, as well as take some questions from our media here. Of course, Vice President Mike Pence just announced the 18 astronauts on the Artemis team. The mission is to land the first woman and the next man on the moon, and then to learn to live and work on another world for the benefit of our world, as well as going on to Mars. I want to introduce the astronauts we have the pleasure of talking to today, and begin with Jessica Amir, NASA astronaut. We have Joe Acaba. We have Jessica Watkins. Matthew Dominic. And Anne McClain. Very good. We're going to start with you, Jessica, and a pretty big day today. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You are a doctorate in, you have a doctorate in marine biology. You're a veteran astronaut. You made history when you did the first 3 all-women spacewalks with Christina Cook. Your mom says you knew you were going to be an astronaut when you were 5 years old, but you were sharing with me that you had a memory of when you first realized you wanted to be an astronaut. Well, when was that?
Yeah, that's right. My mom tells me the story that I started saying it when I was 5 years old, but I don't know if you remember everything you said when you were 5. I certainly don't. My first distinct memory of it was when I was in the 1st grade. Our teacher asked us to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I drew that kind of iconic image of the Apollo era of an astronaut in a spacesuit standing on the surface of the moon next to the American flag. So that was what I said really from that moment. I never changed that line of what I wanted to do.
That's incredible to think about you making that drawing, and now here you are on the Artemis team.
Yes, thank you so much. It is really incredibly exciting, of course, to be part of this exceptional team. You saw all of these faces, and I know that everybody in the astronaut office and all of our international partners are so ready to support this next chapter of human spaceflight.
And what are you looking most forward to in this mission?
For me, the Artemis mission is important for 3 main reasons. First of all, for exploration. I truly believe it is an innate characteristic of the human species to explore. Secondly, an easy one for me as a scientist, for science. If you look at the scientific experiments that were conducted on the Apollo missions, they changed the way that we see our solar system. And we are still, to this day, learning from those very samples using newer technologies all the time. But there is so much yet to discover. I'm sure our colleague Jessica Watkins can tell you a lot more about the exciting geological opportunities that remain for us to uncover on the moon, that we will uncover, as science is a very critical component of the Artemis missions. And lastly, if you think again to those Apollo missions, they had a profound impact on many other aspects of our culture and society, stimulating participation and interest and growth of all of the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math, and of course, those had ramifications far beyond that of exploration that our society still benefits from today. I am certain that Artemis will continue to have all of those same effects.
We appreciate your confidence, too, as you get started with this team. I want to move on to Joe Acaba, a former math and science teacher, a veteran astronaut with 10 months in space of experience. But you also taught at Melbourne High School, just an hour down the road from right here at the Kennedy Space Center, and Denellen as well. So I want to start by asking you, yes, you were here, of course, when you launched on the space shuttle, but what's it like to be back here as a teacher in an area where you taught kids, as well as launched into space?
Yeah, it's great to be back here at the Kennedy Space Center out here in Florida. You know, being part of the shuttle program was amazing and quite the honor to have. I was here last month as part of the Commercial Crew Program supporting Crew 1 that just launched, so lots of history, but a lot coming up in the future. But to be an educator and be back here today where I taught, down the road, I hope some of my students are watching today. My hair's a little bit shorter than it used to be when I taught.
You had some long hair.
I had some long hair. It's hard times being a school teacher. I hope they're watching. I know they were very excited when I applied to become an astronaut and when I finally got selected. But I hope that there's a new generation of students that are watching this today, and they're excited. Jessica, you could hear her excitement and how she felt when she was 5 years old. I didn't think that when I was 5 years old, and I thought I found my profession being a school teacher, but here I am today. So it's cool to be here. The history is awesome, but we're all here to look towards the future.
And you speak very highly of teachers who choose that profession. I wonder, you mentioned the students, they are still in contact with you?
Yeah, so I do have some students now that, they email me. I'm sure after this announcement, my name will be out there and they'll probably shoot me a line. So it's cool to hear from them, to share what I'm doing, but really to hear about what they're doing. And there's no greater profession than being a school teacher, and it's that impact that we have as educators that just go on and on. So it's cool.
And that's fantastic. And as a teacher, have you thought about how you will share Artemis with everyone?
Boy, there's a lot of ways to do that. The program itself is exciting. There is no kid out there, all of us here, that have not looked up into the sky and wondered, what would it be like to go up there and walk on that thing? And so what I want to do as an educator is to, inspire those students that this is a possibility, but we're going to the moon to get to Mars. And it's those students that we're going to talk to that are going to get us there as engineers and astronauts.
And it's incredible. You talk about everyone looking up at the moon and wondering what it's like. I did as a kid as well. So we will be looking up at you and certainly rooting you all on. I want to move now to Jessica Watkins. Welcome. I understand you have some family here, locally in the area.
I do. That's correct. Yes, I have some family that lives in the Orlando area. And a few weeks back, a couple months actually, I was able to tie in with them. They came out to, my aunt is an educator, just like Joe, and she was able to bring her class, a lot of her school actually, come do a field trip out here at KSC. And I was able to tie in and say hello to them, so that was really excellent.
That's pretty neat. Let's talk a little bit about your resume. You're a geologist, as was mentioned. You study landslides on Earth and Mars. You're an aquanaut and a member of the science team for the Mars Curiosity rover. You also, I thought this was interesting, won a national championship with the Stanford women's Division I rugby team, which is pretty impressive, no?
No, that's correct. I was definitely privileged to be a part of that team and get to experience that win with them as well. Being part of a rugby team, as Ann McLean can attest to as well as a rugby player as well. There are a lot of similarities to a rugby team as to this Artemis team and the whole NASA team overall. On a rugby team, you have people with very varied skill sets. You have people who are smaller, people who are larger, or people who are stronger. People bring different strengths to the table. And I think that's true both of this Artemis team and NASA as well. And all of those strengths come together to really build a productive and winning team.
And I think one of your strengths is speed. I was looking at one of the wonderfully produced videos that are done on you, and there's this great clip of you scoring a try. Two defenders are coming to get you, and they're running in the same direction, and you split them on the way to score, but it's not so much that you split them, but you blew by them, and they were running in the same direction you did.
Yes, well, so of all those skill sets, the only one that I have is speed, so I have to use it wisely.
It was wonderful watching that score. Let's talk a little bit about the mysteries of the moon, because you talk often about how geology helps us understand the history of what happened. What are you looking forward to in terms of solving the mysteries of the moon?
Absolutely. I'm happy that you asked that question. Certainly the moon, we have a lot that we can learn from the moon as well as learn about the moon. In terms of understanding the history of the moon itself, one of the big questions in the polar regions is looking at lunar volatiles. So understanding how those volatiles formed, where they are, their distribution and extent, which will also help us in the future as we start to look for a site to build our moon base and continue into the future. The moon also allows us to look at planetary processes, particularly looking at impact cratering, which is a process that we see on multiple bodies, rocky bodies in the solar system, and helps us understand ages within the solar system. The moon will also help us understand more about the Earth. For one, the moon-Earth system and the origin of the moon helps us understand more about Earth and how we can apply some of that knowledge to what we know about the Earth. And lastly, the moon can also function as a platform where we can start to explore the sun and astrophysics, start to observe the universe from a different vantage point and learn so much more.
And we need resources on the moon as well, right, if we're going to sustain a presence there, which is very key.
Absolutely.
Jessica, thank you so much. And now, Mr. Matthew Dominic, U.S. Navy test pilot and fighter pilot. You flew 61 combat missions. You're a double E, electrical engineer. And interestingly, you were kidnapped aboard an aircraft carrier where your fellow airman or seaman rather shaved a stripe right through the top of your head. Right, held you down?
That's correct. I'd be lying if I say I didn't deserve it. I had played a practical joke on them, and they got me back.
Well, I can only imagine what that looked like.
I had to finish the job and get rid of the rest of the hair, yeah.
You went full cue ball, shave it all off. Well, that sounded like that was the right choice. In talking about, as we stand here, and this mission, the Artemis mission, we look at this great vehicle, the Saturn V rocket. I know you're a tinkerer, and you love to take things apart, understand how they work. When you look at this machine, what are your thoughts? What do you think about when you see something this impressive that made history here in America?
I mean, I've been struggling to listen and to see here as we stand in this room, the Saturn V building, and look at all the incredible hardware. And it's a thing of dreams, right? It's a thing, it instantly takes you to a childhood dream. You look and you imagine every bolt and every valve and every fuel line that runs to this hardware, or the quarter-scale Orion, or the SLS on the mobile launcher over there, and think about the people in the team in America coming together and our national partners coming together to make that work, right? You could imagine being the engineer waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, well, maybe I should change this to make the design a little bit better, because there's a few really lucky pink bodies, 150 feet that way who are going to ride this thing, and you don't want to let the world down right? You don't want to ever let the world down. There's an immense weight on your shoulders. So as I look around, I see the hardware. I imagine walking out to the launch pad in a dream, and you go up that elevator, and the building is creaking in the wind, and the wind is rustling through as you come out the door. Like the gas, the rocket has just been fueled, and it's creaking with the new stress and the new loads. Those are the things I think about when I look at this hardware. I instantly enter a dream world. This is the thing of dreams.
Right.
I'm incredibly lucky to be here.
I feel like you just took me there in the way that you described it. That's outstanding. I know that you've been involved. We were talking about your background and how you're applying it now as an astronaut, the interface between human and electronics. And so you've already been working with the team that's building Orion. Tell me a little bit about that.
In the Navy, I worked in, my specialty was human-machine interface, right? And it's been really incredible to have worked in the Navy, training and working and redesigning flight control laws to land on an aircraft carrier and revolutionizing how we did that. And now those same techniques, the same principles, as we sit down with all of the vendors, as we look at the human landing system to get ready to go back to the moon, having the same theoretical conversations with them about the human-machine interface necessary to go and do the task of landing on the moon. Like you wake up every morning and you feel this immense burden for society and humanity that I need to do this well today. I'm the one, a bunch of us, all of the astronauts in the Corps, all of the people at all the centers are in the arena trying to make this happen for humanity. And so it's incredible to see those just be working with the hardware and making the decisions in the room. And maybe it's COVID and maybe you're walking out of a Teams meeting, right? A video chat. And you realize, whoa, we just talked about landing on the moon today and how we're going to make it happen. So it's very easy to be motivated to come to work.
And it's interesting, you talk about the responsibility. I mean, there's inherent risk, obviously, with being an astronaut. That's always brought down by NASA in the best way that we can. But you were telling me that you don't think about that. You think about the responsibility that you have.
I think if you had to choose between two fears, what I'm more afraid of, dying on a rocket or letting down all of the people that worked so hard to make this happen, all of the international partners that came together, that toiled for their careers, decades to make something happen, and you maybe didn't study a little bit more so that you know the right time to throw the switch to make it happen. I think there's an immense amount of responsibility there. I think I'm more afraid of that than of dying, right? Like that's the fear. That's the thing that drives you when you wake up.
That sounds like the right stuff to me. Thank you, Matthew, for sharing that with us. Ann McLean, welcome, and thank you for being here. A little bit about you: West Point grad, Marshall Scholarship winner in 2002, a military instructor pilot, veteran astronaut with a call sign Animal. Tell me a little bit how you got that call sign.
Sure. Well, as Jessica said, there's a lot of different skill sets on a rugby field. Some people run fast, and some people hit hard. And
which one are you?
I was in the latter. Okay. If Jessica and I were ever on the same pitch, I couldn't catch her. I think one of the important reasons I'd like to go to the moon is a fighting chance to catch Jessica there. But
no gravity evens the field, right?
That's right.
Well, that's outstanding. I want to ask you, you talk often about overcoming your doubts as you achieved some pretty incredible things in your career so far. As you look at the Artemis program, kind of what are you sensing about the challenge that lies ahead?
Yeah, you know, I talk to people often about the doubts that's in the back of our mind, right? Because we're all human, and this is human spaceflight. And the human in human spaceflight is the most complicated part. And we all wake up in the morning. None of us wake up and go, you know what, I'm going to do 100% correct today, right? We all wake up and there's like something in the back of our mind that makes us doubt. You know, and the people that achieve and that make things happen are the ones that address the doubt, respect it, and move on, right? Bravery is not the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Okay, and there's plenty of times that everybody on this stage and everybody out here was worried about something, doubted something, wondered if that was the right path for them, thought something was going to be too hard for them to achieve, and guess what they did? They did it anyway. This crew and our crew at NASA is a group of doers. We are dreamers, but even more so we're doers. And in order to do, you got to face those fears, face those doubts, and move forward.
And that's why, you know, people look up to you and the rest of the astronauts so much when they hear things like this and knowing what you do. You were telling me earlier that one of the biggest questions you get from the public is, Jessica, or Ann, sorry, are you going to be the first woman on the moon? And I thought your response was interesting. What do you say?
Yeah, we do get asked that, and especially I think even more so now we're going to get asked that. Is it going to be you? And one of the things that I learned from the first day I stepped in the halls at NASA is the caliber of people that we work with. And so right now, what I know is that I'm either going to walk on the moon, or one of my friends is going to walk on the moon, and both of those scenarios are beyond my wildest dreams when I was a kid.
Wow, that's special to hear that. And you're also one of the few astronauts that has a Saturday Night Live skit done about you. By the way, did you think that was funny?
I was just happy she got her uniform right. As an Army officer, it's very important to me to make sure that Patch is in the right place, so I hand it to him for getting it right.
They got the details right in it, right? Well, you folks really are an inspiring bunch, and thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation with us. We do want to get to some questions from the media who have gathered here, and we'd like to ask you to say your name and affiliation, and to whom you would like to direct the question.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for taking my question. I'm Amy from Space.com, and I was just, whoever wants to answer, how excited are you guys to be in the first class for this program and to maybe be the first to ride on a new rocket and a new spacecraft?
How about Jessica? There's two of them on stage,
one.
Jessica
Which one's it gonna
Meir
be?
or Jessica Watkins.
Jessica, it's all you.
Yes, I can definitely tell you that all of us here on stage, as well as the 13 others back in Houston, as well as the rest of the astronaut corps, we are all so excited to be a part of this effort. We're so excited about moving forward, taking the next step, and making this dream going back to the moon a reality.
Awesome. And then I had a question for Jessica Meir. I'm sure that you guys are all comrades and friends and get along really well, but how special is it to share this with Christina, who you got to share your spacewalks with and your time in space?
It's really amazing. I think it kind of goes back to what Ann said earlier about the fact that we are all colleagues and we all work closely together, but we are all friends as well. When I go to work every day, I know that I'm going to see people that not only do I love to work with, but I just love to hang out with in my free time and to spend all of these things of life. As you can imagine, becoming an astronaut is full of a lot of changes in our lives for all of us. And you really have an exceptionally close bond, especially with your classmates. Christina's one of those classmates. Ann's one of my classmates. All 8 of us in that class particularly like brothers and sisters. So it is an absolute privilege and honor, and it just makes it even more special to be sharing it with those people that I know that I love so much.
Hi there, Rachel Joy with Florida Today. Jessica Watkins, you very well could be the first woman on the moon. I'm curious, why do you think it's important that a woman should go to the moon?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's a really big honor for all of us to be here, to be part of this team, to be part of this effort, and to know that we can contribute to that first woman and that next man on the moon. I think for me, what that means is just being a part of this Artemis generation. It's something that, as we kind of described, is something that we've all looked forward to, or hoped for, dreamed of since we were little. And for that dream to be becoming a reality, really just for the nation, that we are going back to the moon, and I think is really exciting for all of us.
And let's broaden that out to our ladies on the stage with you. Jessica Meir, you have any thoughts on that?
I think Jessica captured it quite well. I mean, we are all ready to be part of this team, and it makes sense. When we came into this, when our class started, we were 50% female, 50% male, and it was the first time that had happened, but it felt normal to us. And this is something that, of course, I get this question a lot in talking about that spacewalk that Christina and I did together. And to us, it really isn't a personal achievement for us. It is paying homage and tribute to the generations of women and other minorities that really were the boundary pushers, that truly broke those glass ceilings to let us be here today. The great thing is for us now, it just seems normal. We are all going to go together to the moon, and we're going to go as a team. And the fact that that is just a thing that's part of everything we do now shows how far we've come. And that's really thanks to those generations before us.
And does it seem normal to you as well?
It does seem normal, and part of that is, when I was up on space station, and, we never even thought about genders or races or religions or nationalities even until somebody asked us about them. And so it has actually made us reflect on the reasons. And my takeaway is that the strongest teams are the most diverse teams. I can be a little hard-headed sometimes, I know that, and I flew my mission with a Canadian doctor. He and I have very different personalities. And the thing with a group is that if everybody's agreeing, nobody's thinking. Okay? And so there were decisions that I made during my mission that my crewmate said, hey, why don't you think about this? And that saved that day, and vice versa. The second part of it is representation. We represent all walks of life in America. And every kid in America, and across the world even now, needs to look and say, if you look like me, I can do this. And it's important for us to be able to look at them and say, you have an opportunity. The doors are open. Come on after us.
And you all three are very much an inspiration to young girls around the world. Another question?
I'm going to ask another question. So Jessica and Matthew, you're both newbies, right? Haven't been to space? Yeah? Okay. So Matthew, your first time going to space is going to be direct to the moon. Is that a little intimidating? I mean, that's like no space station trip first. What do you think?
Let's go. We're going. We go. Of course it's intimidating, right? And it's like I talked about before. You just don't want to let so many people who've worked so hard on this team, right? It's going to be an international coalition that's going to go do it. You don't want to let them down, and it just makes you study harder. It makes you tougher, makes you stronger.
Okay, congratulations to all of you.
All right, we have another question.
Hey everybody, Mike from Fox 35 News in Orlando. May I ask this Jessica a question first? We hear that when we go to the moon this time, it's going to be to go there to stay. And I wonder if you've thought about sort of how long you would be willing to be there. Have you thought about what if you could go, but you couldn't come back?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can tell you that at the end of my 205 days on the space station, I was not ready to leave. If it were up to me, I would have stayed up there, even if there weren't, a COVID-filled Earth that I was coming back to. Even despite that, 205 days wasn't long enough. So I think when we are up there doing these missions, time passes very quickly because we are in this whole novel atmosphere with so many exciting opportunities around us, so much to discover and so much to do, that for me it just flew by. I think it's going to be exactly true, probably even more so when we get all the way to the moon, that we are going to have so much to do. We're going to have so many people to not let down, as Matt mentioned, and we're going to be there and ready to stay for as long as the mission dictates. And so I think personally, I always trust in the training that we receive and on the hundreds and thousands of people that are supporting us on the ground. They're the ones that are designing the correct mission architecture, so they will design the appropriate length mission to get the most out of it for all of us back on Earth. So absolutely, I'll be ready to stay for whatever duration that dictates.
Years?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think absolutely. If we start talking about this first mission to Mars, it would probably be a 3-year mission the way it's looking right now, and I would be ready to do that when the team has it all designed and ready to go.
Good for you. Anne, question for you. Is it possible that you could be involved in the Artemis program and also the Mars program? You've been to station, right? So they're choosing astronauts who have been involved in shuttle and low Earth orbit at the station. Do you think about, what if I could check both boxes, the moon and Mars?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because right now at NASA we're at a really unique time where we have a lot of overlapping missions, right? And just in our astronaut office, we have 50 astronauts, almost 50 astronauts right now, and we're training on 4 different vehicles. Some people are training to test a brand new vehicle. Some people are training to fly from a vehicle overseas for a 6-month mission to the space station. Some people are designing and looking at the lunar landers. And so all of us are involved in something different. And none of us are successful if all of those aren't successful. And so we are a very busy office right now. And so right now, the Mars missions at our office on our operational level, they're not quite there yet as a direct Mars mission. Obviously, the space station is one of our proving grounds. The moon's going to be our next proving ground. And if I can stay healthy long enough, then I'd love to check that next block.
We're certainly working on the technology to, this moon will be the proving ground in order to build that technology to get out to Mars. Another question.
All right. Team, congratulations. Well done. Greg Paloma, Spectrum News 13, right here on Florida Space Coast. My question is, back in 1969 in July, there was a gentleman who said some very famous words when he went to a certain place for the first time. And this is for anybody who would like to jump in. Again, not a rigged question, but have you thought about what you may say, whether you're the next man or the first woman to land on the moon?
No. I mean, this is just, it's a dream come true for a lot of us just to be here. For me, it'd be a little premature, but, if I happen to be that person, trust me, there'll be some thought put into that. Like Matt said, that's one thing you don't want to mess up when you have that opportunity.
And Matt, it looks like you were pondering that in your head in this very moment.
Of course, and I was racking and stacking all of the things in the priority order, and that was way at the end of the list. Not ready yet.
There's a lot of work to do.
I think if that's something that's keeping us up, a lot of things have gone right, and that's really exciting. And if we know who it's going to be, I think we're going to be ribbing them a lot and say, you better think of something good.
Yeah. And maybe I'm not going to help you.
I can imagine it, even like the inspiration coming on the journey there, right? You might have something in your mind, and you might change it along the way, just as many writers do. A follow-up question?
If there's time, I'd love to throw this at you. If you could put some words in a time capsule for people 100 years from now about what this mission is, with the Artemis mission, what would you like to say? What would you like to say to people, and not just Americans, but people across the world, and maybe people will meet eventually on other worlds? What would it be 100 years from now? What would you like to say to them?
I think I see spaceflight as it's a very long relay race, and we're all really fortunate to be able to hold the baton for a short period of time. So if in 100 years, I would almost want to ask them a question, but I think what I would just say is I hope that for the time I held the baton, I made this a better program, I changed lives for the better, the program for the better, and that your lives are better for it.
Hard to follow that up.
Yeah. Thank you. Good luck, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to our media members. We appreciate you joining in and asking the questions. One last question, though, for you that I have. With a show of hands, who would like to be the first woman or the next man to go to the moon? There it is, all five, in honor of the Mercury 7 press conference. We appreciate seeing that. Thank you all for being here. Coming to Florida, taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and talk with us and share your thoughts and feelings about the Artemis program. We greatly appreciate it. And if you want to learn more about these astronauts, you can do so by going online to nasa.gov/Artemis team. Again, that's nasa.gov/Artemis team. Their biographies are there, as well as some very finely produced videos about them where you can hear them in their own words. I want to thank you all for watching and remind you to keep looking up. Thanks, everyone.